Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to the latest episode of the Hard Compound Live. We are back again. For those of you who haven't tuned in before, my name's Rich and I run and operate the Hard Compound. We're a one-stop shop for all things motorsport, and we can be found on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter and Instagram. Just search for the Hard Compound on any of those platforms. Come and give us a follow and come and join in as we endeavour to share a love of motorsport, which is why we're here. We generally put out three written articles every day on Facebook, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, morning, lunchtime, and evening here in the UK. And these take the form of race reviews, race previews, throwbacks, breaking news, any livery unveils, birthdays on this days, or just major events, or anything that we like to shake a stick at, really. It's all about showing a love of motorsport, so do come along and join us. As you may have noticed, we also do live interviews, such as this one. And just as we are now, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter on all of our live chats. And these are automatically saved in the video section on Facebook and in the live section over on YouTube. We've done almost 140 of these now, which is amazing. And I'm not going to name all the guests, you'll be glad to know, but we've had a number of guests from across the motorsport spectrum. Racers past and present, and some rising stars as well. Just on Sunday, we spoke with upcoming short oval star from the USA, Miss Lacey Furno. She is going all the way to NASCAR, I am sure. But yes, we've had a number of terrific guests from across the motorsport spectrum. As I said, we've had the honour and the privilege of speaking with Mr. Mario Andretti, with Mr. Jackie Ickx, with Hans Stuck, with Chip Ganassi, with Malcolm Wilson, the boss of the Ford World Rally team. We've spoken with Frank Durney, the legendary Williams car designer. We've also spoken with John Watson, with Martin Donnelly, Gian-Maria Bruni, Nico Prost, Emanuele Perot, Ari Leyendijk, Carl Wendlinger, Will Power, Scott Pruitt, Paul Page, Mark Blundell, Eddie Cheever, Derek Daly, Connor Daly just recently, Derek Warwick, David Brabham, and many others. But if you're here, you're probably a touring car fan. And we've spoken with a number of touring car drivers from past and present, the likes of Mr. Dick Bennett. We've spoken with Rob and Bradley Gravitt from the support series. We've had Dan Zelos, Lydia Wormsley. We've spoken with Chris Smiley, Rick Parfitt, Jake Hill, Jason Plato, Paul Radicic, Dan Camish, Ronan Pearson, Jason Plato, I think I've already said, Steve Soper, John Cleland, Anthony Reid, Ivan Muller, Frank Sittner, Andy Prio, and many others, and Aaron Taylor-Smith. And Aaron leads us nicely on to our guest this evening, because it's Aaron's teammate at PowerMax Racing. He's the only driver I think I've spoken to that has won 2 championships in one season. And he is currently making his way up and up and up the British Touring Car Championship, getting more and more noticed as he goes. Very impressive racer, and he's joining us right now. So please join me in extending a very warm welcome to PowerMax Racing's Mikey Doble. And we are connected. Mikey, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. All the better for being on here joining you tonight.
Well, that's very nice of you to say. Thank you very much. I'm glad it's not a chore. Firstly, thank you very much, Mikey, for coming and swapping your scheduled date of next week back to this week. We've had to chop and change a few things. So I appreciate you changing your plans and coming on. Thanks very much.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I've watched many of your podcasts before and seen some of the guests you just mentioned over the last sort of 12 months to 18 months really, and yeah, they're quite interesting, and I'm pleased to be on here, and we'll see what tonight has in store.
Yeah, absolutely. You're adding your name to the list, and the list keeps getting longer, so sorry about the long intro. Just want to say hi to the folks in the comments, including my dad Derek. He said glad to see I got home in time. Traffic's been terrible around here, folks, but it's been a bit of a rush, but I'm home. Andy Hopley from Hopper's Motorsport Vlogs, go and check him out on Facebook. He's in. Evening, Andy. Tracy Hickley, David Allen, and many others. If you have any comments or questions, do put them in to the comment section on whichever platform you are tuning in on. And if the technology is working, we'll see them in real time and we'll work them in. So thank you very much for joining us. yeah, before we get cracking on the whole story of you, Mikey, bit of a hot weekend at Brands Hatch, wasn't it? But it was pretty pretty solid from your side, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Like you say, I think solid is the best word to describe the weekend. Really, I mean, it was a bit of a game of snakes and ladders, really, on the Sunday, as I like to call a typical touring car Sunday. But yeah, I mean, you referred to the temperature there, and whilst it wasn't probably the hottest conditions I've ever raced in, I think for Brands Indy is definitely one of the most physical tracks on the calendar that we go to. You just don't get a rest around that place. So the 24 laps of the Indy circuit at Brands on close battling in a British touring car definitely takes a lot out of you.
Yes, I'm sure. I mean, we could see, how hot and sweaty you guys were all getting, and but it's nice to see. I guess it's a bit nicer to race in that than the wet and the issues that we had at Donington, which we're going to come to very shortly. But I guess, as always, the best place to start is right at the start, and where your interest and love of motorsport came from, because there's a family link, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from as early as I can remember, I've always been fascinated by cars, and in particular motorsport. I mean, I wouldn't say that when I was growing up, I was had a particular love for road cars or kind of all the different sports cars and models that are out there at the time, but particularly motorsport. I was obsessed with Formula One, touring cars, NASCAR. I know all the drivers, all their numbers, all their sponsors, who they drove for, and what they've done. It was a bit like that, really. And yeah, like you say, my family history started with my grandfather and his brother racing in Grand Prix long circuit karting back in the sort of late 60s, early 70s, when it was a pretty big thing back then. You had sort of ex-Formula One drivers or progressing Formula One drivers that were taking part on the grid. I think my granddad, he won the Dutch Grand Prix a couple of times over in Zandvoort, and he also won the Silverstone Grand Prix in the 250 national class. His brother, I believe, was British champion as well at one of the levels. I can't remember exactly what class that was in, but they were quite the figureheads in the world of karting back then. And yeah, my dad, he raced pretty much from the age of probably about 20, and he started in long circuit karting as well, just kind of when my granddad began to wind it in a little bit. And he did very well. My family did start off their car racing pretty much with slicks and wings, more of an open wheel style of racing. And then from there, my dad moved into a class called Formula 2000, which was a little bit like a Formula Ford car that we see today, with a Van Diemen chassis, but with slick tyres and wings just to, make them a bit quicker, sort of a 2-litre engine car. So it was a good series back in the day, in which he won the championship in around 1995, 96, something like that. So he did well at that. And then from there, he moved into a championship called V6 Eurocar, which similar to what Bobby's dad used to race on that Eurocar package with the Legends and the V6s and that. But my dad raced in the bigger cars, the V6s, which at the time were very much the UK's answer to NASCAR. I mean, they used to race on the Mallory Mile quite famously at the time. And yeah, they did Brands Hatch, they did Liddon Hill, Pembrey, the shorter circuits like that. But it was a big package, they had a big crowds, big following. And back in the 90s and that was a really exciting day's racing to go and watch. So yeah, a lot of racing has happened in our family, and I was brought up first watching the V6s. I do have memories of that. I was born in 1998, so he raced that for probably 3 or 4 years after I was born. So I see the look of dismay there when I said that.
Making me feel old, Mikey.
But yeah, so that's pretty much where my first love was. And then for those of you touring car fans out there, you'll remember the Seat Cupra Cup as well, which was on the Toka package back in the mid 2000s. So my dad also did 3 years of that as well. So I very much brought up around the Toka package in my early days.
Must admit, when you came onto the BTCC scene and I saw your surname, I thought, he's got to be related. The age must work. Because I'd seen your dad race on the, on the on the Cupra grid. So I mean, I guess it was almost inevitable that you were going to get involved somehow. Obviously, you had the interest in racing, and as you mentioned, all the different series that you were following when you were young, and then your dad's racing as well. When did you first think about having a go yourself, or was it just a case of it was always going to happen, whether you kind of liked it or not?
Well, I definitely didn't make it difficult for my dad to get me into racing, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, it was always going to happen. I mean, I think I got my first kart at the age of 6 years old, I think, which was a little Bambino. He used to take me down to our warehouse out the back of our workshop, where our work was based in Colston, and there was like a small like yard type thing, yeah, with a concrete floor. And we used to go down there on a Sunday morning and use all of the recycled motorcycle tires that were all piled up on the side. And I used to go out there with him and map out a circuit. And it was like, this week it's going to be Brands Hatch. Next week it was Alton Park. Once I had Alton Park, where the hairpin loop went almost down to the road, and turn around and come back. And and I was quite particular. If there was a corner that looked a little bit out of place, I wasn't having any of it. So it had to be perfect. And it just went from there, really.
That's great. I love that you were doing it on kind of that scale with a kart. I was doing it with Matchbox cars in my living room. I wasn't quite as powered as you were, but I guess, I mean, once you started racing on your homemade Brands Hatch and Alton Park and other layouts, I guess it was obviously fun for you to do it. When did you start wanting to go to a proper kart track and start competing and start trying to beat people?
Well, I mean, I started karting as soon as I was old enough, really. I mean, you had to be, I can't quite remember the age for what was then the Coma Cadet series. You could either do the Coma Cadet or the Honda Cadet. The Comas were the two-stroke versions, which is kind of what Lewis Hamilton, Jenson Button raced. Or you had the Hondas, which were like the four-strokes, which were more down south, to be honest. You had to go more Midlands and north to race the two-strokes. But yeah, I mean, I think I was maybe 7 years old when I did my first test in a proper competitive kart, and I think you had to be 8 to race. That was it. So I did my first season of racing at 8 years old, and we was kind of going around the 2 or 3 kart tracks, 3 times a month, sometimes 4 times a month. So yeah, when you're racing at that age, you're out sort of 40 to 45 times a year. None of this 7 rounds or 10 rounds that you get in cars. It's pretty full on. And my dad, we always ran the kart ourselves. Or say I didn't do anything. My dad did it all, of course. And I just came out and drove it. But yeah, I mean, it was just flat out for probably about 4 or 5 years on that championship, doing racing at places like Shennington. We did Lydd down on the south coast. We did Rye House round in near Hoddesdon, up in I can't remember the county that's in. And then from 2009, sort of North London to the east kind of area. And then we did the British Championship, the Formula Kart Stars, from 2009 through to 2011. So my age group was very much Lando Norris. I raced with a lot, at Shennington and different club rounds, and the British Championship for pretty much all of my time in karting. George Russell as well, but he was a little bit older than me. So as I was kind of beginning, he was in the senior years of his cadet career. There you go, Hertfordshire. I knew it was in there somewhere. Amazing what a camera does to your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we mentioned like Lando Norris there. Got to give him a huge thumbs up for his win in Miami. That was absolutely brilliant to see that. Long overdue. But I just love the fact that you were out, almost like what 10 months of the year essentially, all told, just like the old like classic lad and dad approach to it, and just going racing because you love racing and it's the best way to learn. And I love that. We hear it so often, and I never get tired. I just wish it was something that I could have done, but we couldn't afford to do it. I've got too many siblings.
Well, I'm the oldest child. I'm the oldest of 3, so much to their detriment, I was the first brother to reach these key little milestones here. So Yeah,
Happy
I
days.
do get it in the ear though on for several other things, being the older brother. So
Yeah. I mean, there's some perks to being the older one, but not so good all the time. I'm the middle one. My brother was into bird watching and all like telescopes and binoculars and all that expensive stuff, and my sister was into horse riding, which isn't cheap, and I was into motorsports and then golf. So I had I had no chance. We couldn't we couldn't do all three. Um, but so you did, as you said, you've worked your way up through various karting ranks, through the age groups, doing a lot of racing, and do correct if I'm wrong. From the research, I saw that it came to a bit of a halt, and you had a bit of a sidestep to something a bit more sedate with the game of golf, which I said I love. I used to play, haven't played for years. Was it a choice at the time of you can either do this or this?
yeah, I mean, like obviously I did karting for many years, probably 5 or 6 years. I did well at club level. I sort of won some winter series and summer series at Shennington and Lydd and Rye House, places like that. Won a few races. Never quite challenged the front boys at this, the Formula Kart Stars level because, like I say, we were always dad and lad. We probably didn't have the fastest engine out there. Some of the data and the variety in carburetors and that the other teams would have had, but we gave it a go, and I learned a lot from it. And then I did move on. I was always a little bit heavy for karting, to be honest, even though I didn't particularly look at it. Wasn't very tall, but I was always struggling on the weight side of it. And if you're a kilo overweight in karting, then you may as well kiss goodnight to the likes of Lando Norris, who's probably about 8 stone wet through.
Yeah.
Now that is, but yeah, I did a season of Super Cadet, which was a bit of a phenomenon at the time that lasted about maybe 2 years and was kind of like a cadet kart on steroids. It was in between a cadet and a full-sized kart, and I did a little bit of Super One on that, but then the championship kind of fizzled out, and then I did a season of Rotax karting after that. But only at club level. I wasn't doing British Championship or anything like that. But golf came about. I mean, it was my dad got me into golf as well from quite a young age. I mean, I was playing golf with him from probably about the age of 7 or 8, and always enjoyed playing it. Got very frustrated by it in my younger days, as everyone does.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's half the challenge and half the fun. And then I'd say it's when I got old enough to start playing golf on my own without needing to be accompanied by an adult. I'd go up the local golf club that I'm a member at, still am today, and just play like 36 holes a day non-stop. My dad would drop me up there on the way to work in the school holidays. I'd go out, tee off the first, and I'd pretty much just keep going around the golf course continuously, sometimes on my own, just trying to beat my best score until he come pick me up in the evening. And from there, at that age, it's really hard to not improve at a really high rate, high trajectory. So I got really good really quickly for my age, and it got to the point where people were saying, you'd be mad to not give this a go. You're one of the most talented golfers I've played with as someone of your age. You're hitting the ball past me at 12 years old, and I'm 45 or whatever, been playing for 20 years. And it was kind of like, it was getting a little bit scary in a good way how quickly I was getting good. Obviously there's lots of golfers out there in that same position, but if you've got the chance to give it a go, then why not? And at that time you're only at school, you haven't got any other responsibilities, you're not working or anything like that. So yeah, it was just a case of I'll continue playing golf. And I didn't really get on that well with the bigger carts, not as in I couldn't drive them, but again, we wasn't really putting in the investment into getting all the right equipment and that. And I just kind of, we was kind of done with it really, all the going around every weekend and that. But I still remain the biggest motorsport fan you could ever have. And I'd still go and watch as many race meetings as I ever did. So I never stepped away from the sport in that sense. I just wasn't competing myself, And yeah, I mean, I ended up playing golf for probably 6 or 7 years, pretty much full time, with the view of going professional. Not once during that period did I dream that I'd even have a race license, let alone end up in the BTCC.
Wow. I mean, it's sort of good to, to have these sort of two things that you're good at, you seem like naturally good at. I mean, golf is one of those things where you've got to be naturally quite adept at it. I find. I mean, there's some people that there's not going to be able to be any good at it, just like with racing or with anything else. And like you got to a decent level, and you played a few, was it a few like regional championships or national championship events, and you got pretty good. But when did you start to think maybe going back to racing might be an option? Was there like a glass ceiling that you hit with a golf, or was it?
I mean, to be honest, it was the racing that pulled me away from the golf, really, because to summarise what I did in golf was I was the Surrey under-18s county champion, knockout once. I got to the final the following year, and that's all scratch. There's no handicaps involved in that. Wow. I played in the Open qualifying before, the major championship, the Open qualifying. I've won Order of Merits out in Portugal. I've won very few sort of little things like that. Surrey county events. I played for Surrey, which is my home county. I've played in, the English Amateur, which is the biggest amateur tournament you can get in the UK. Well, second to the British Amateur, of course. I played in some big stuff, and I also went to a golf college instead of doing sixth form. I went to a college for 2 years, and we pretty much did nothing but golf. We went touring into Portugal for the spring term, so warm winter training. It was all proper. It was what golfers would do that wanted to be professionals. But it just got to a point where, right, I was playing off +1, which for those of you that know your golf is an incredibly low handicap. That's in the top probably 0.5% of golfers in the country.
I got down as far as 9. That's as close as I ever got. I got to single figures for about 3 months, and then it went back up again.
Yeah, well, if you can get to single figures, then you can play a proper game of golf. And I think if anything lower than 18 really is better than average. But yeah, I mean, it got to the point where I was really, obviously at a really high level, but to actually get to the level where I could earn money from it, it was like I either continue playing golf all through my early 20s and sacrifice everything and not really have much of a life outside of golf. And the likelihood is that I probably wouldn't have made a bean at it, and then I'd have been resentful that I didn't do what I really love doing, and that's motorsport. So I think it was around 2019, so actually an overlap into the start of my racing career, that I just said, I'm not, I'm just going to knock this on the head. I'm going to continue playing golf, and I play golf all the time still now, but I'm just going to knock on the head the aspirations of turning professional, because it's not really what I want to do. Being brutally honest, I want to go racing on a weekend. I don't want to play golf and go and do 3 hours practicing in the rain. So and yeah, I mean, it was 2018 that I resumed my racing career in the BMW Compact Cup, which I know you're going to come on to in a minute. But so it kind of went like that.
No, that's fair enough. And I did see, last thing on the golf, I did see you played. I saw you played down at Celtic Manor, down in South Wales, which is fantastic course. I went to the I think it was the Welsh Open in 2013 or 14. Went there for the Saturday and the Sunday, and I think Loughton won it. But yeah, it was a cracking course to walk around. So I bet it was a great one to play as well.
Yeah, it's the second time I played the 2010 course there, and it beats me up every time. You think you're a good golfer until you go and try and tackle a course like that, and then you walk off with your tail between your legs. But sadly, it was literally just after the Donington BTCC first round, so I didn't exactly put any time into preparing my game for the 2010 course. So yeah, unfortunately, my gross score did start with an 8 that day, which if you're a scratch golfer should never happen. But yeah, it's still a fabulous course nonetheless.
Yeah, especially those last few holes up on the hill there, and then over the water. Yeah, smashing course. Right, sorry folks, we know you're not golf fans, but yeah, we had to cover that because it's part of Mikey's journey, and I'm looking forward to seeing Tiger back on course as well, very very soon, because he's my hero growing up. So yes, back to cars. You'd obviously been away for a while, obviously didn't want to do the karting again. You mentioned the BMW Compact Cup, which is where you made your return. I kind of know why you went down that route, but can you tell everyone why you ended up in the BMW Compact Cup as your return?
Yeah, I mean, I remember exactly why we ended up in the BMW Compact Cup, to be honest. I mean, I was actually returning from a game of golf with a couple of buddies down in Kent. And it was the Thursday leading up to the Formula Ford Festival in 2017. And I'd done a Palmer Sport Day that year, which was the first time I'd tested my hand in a proper race car on a track. So I'd already, had the taste that I wanted to be back out there. And I called into Brands Hatch to watch some testing on the way back. I think it was the Friday actually, because they were all out there testing, and me and my dad were going there on the Sunday to watch the festival because it's one of the best club meetings you can go to watch in the UK, I think, the Formula Ford Festival. But as I've walked in, I'm walking around the paddock and that, I get a phone call from my dad, and he said, obviously he knew that I was made noise about wanting to return to racing and everything. And he said, oh, there's this one make BMW championship there this weekend called the Compact Cup. They're like 3 series things. It looks relatively low cost and whatever. Why don't you go and have a look at some of the cars and talk to a couple of the drivers? So I thought, okay, I'll go and do that. So here's me on my own, sort of walking around all, a bit shy and everything, looking in the paddock. And I'm like, oh, there's sort of 30 cars in there. And I started talking to a couple of drivers, and, they all were enthusiastic about the championship and the cars and everything. So that was that. And then we come down on the Sunday, watched the racing, was impressed by the racing and, the show it put out on the track. And then about 2 or 3 months later, we found ourselves with one in our garage, followed by a couple of weeks after that, 2 of them in our garage. And it was me and my dad were both making a return after a lengthy period away from racing to the Compact Cup.
Oh, that's fantastic. You just sort of pop in to see what's going on, and you end up, racing in it and getting it all together and going racing. And as you say, I mean, obviously we touched on cost, and we're going to touch on cost of racing, because I know we had a quick chat about it up at Donington about cost of racing, which is always going to come into it. But obviously low cost always helps. When you began to go racing, did you have any sort of hopes or plans or anything for that first season back, or was it just a case of, right, let's just learn racing in a car for the first time and learn the series and just get yourself back into it? Or were you thinking, I want to go and win, I want to go and beat people? Were you that kind of competitive straight off the bat?
Absolutely nothing at all, really. I had no real expectations about where I thought I was going to finish. I mean, one thing I will say is, like, my dad was always kind of my yardage stick about how well I was doing, because he was a quick driver back in his younger days, and to go out pretty much at the first round and I was on about his pace, and I knew that I would I was doing okay for myself because of that. Now obviously he's a lot older now. I say he's not that old, but he's late 50s, so he's not the driver he once was, but he's still no slouch. So I knew that I was sort of going all right, but I had no intentions or expectations to challenge for the title or anything like that. We were completely running the cars ourselves. We knew nothing about what best way to set them up or to make them tick. They were literally just 2 second-hand cars. I mean, my car, believe it or not, it cost £4,500, my first race car, and it come with £1,000 V box all set up in it. I mean, wow. That's the sort of, it was like, there's the cheapest one, why don't we go and have a look at that? And it was an old BMW that we lugged back on a trailer. And obviously my dad had raced some pretty nice race cars before. Not that they're not nice, but he was like, what have you just made me go and pick up? I mean, a 25-year-old BMW compact, and he's used to sort of slicks and wings, but we soon adapted, and we got better and better throughout the season. We were always solid, but we weren't, we hadn't thrown ourselves at it. We hadn't invested time into the engines and setting them up and everything and learning how to drive. We were just taking our time with it, really.
And I can't go over how cheap that is. And obviously £4,500 isn't that cheap in any walk of life, but in motorsport terms, that is phenomenally cheap. And I just love the fact that you said you weren't really invested in it with any testing or putting loads of time into it, because I had a quick look at the results. You had like some solid some like solid points at Brands Hatch and Snetterton and Cadwell to start with. Obviously, great circuits to learn on. I just want to talk about Cadwell Park because I've always said if it was a little bit wider, it would be a brilliant / crazy BTCC circuit. What was it like to drive in the Compact Cup?
Yeah, I mean, I've raced Cadwell 3 or 4 times in the Compact Cup. My dad used to love Cadwell. I mean, I must say, it doesn't suit the cars that great.
Right.
It's a lovely track. It's great. Yeah, it's a really nice setting and everything, and it's got some really interesting corners, but it is a little bit narrow. It's a little bit tight in sections. And for the Compact Cup, there's a lot of corners where you're just not quite in the right gear because, you know, the gears are quite spaced out. It's a general sort of H pattern gearbox. You know, you're only really in third and fourth around the whole lap, and then you're down to second for that little hairpin. But, you know, like going up the mountain and that, you know, if I was in like the Ginetta I went on to race, we've got a few more gears to play with. It might have been a little bit more exciting to drive, but yeah, it's just a bit clumsy, I'd say is the word, to drive a Compact Cup car around Cadwell, and extremely difficult to overtake. But when you do get a lap hooked up around there, it is a pretty special track to drive.
Yeah, fantastic. So I enjoy watching the bike race in there and see them flying off the top of the mountain, which is always quite a sight. It's one we need to get to. Yeah, I mean, we should say that obviously you and as you touched on, you and your dad were racing. Obviously, we've had you know, guys like Ricky Carlard and Rob Carlard who have raced together in GT racing and, you know, things like that. What's it like racing against your dad? I've always wondered what that's like, racing against your father and obviously your dad racing against you. Must be an interesting kind of dynamic. Was he the one you were chasing more than anyone else?
I mean, yeah, because we were always so evenly matched on times at the beginning. Yeah, we'd always qualify like almost on the same row of the grid every time. You know, we'd always be sort of back end of the top 10 when we first started. Yeah, or early teens, which out of 35, 40 cars wasn't bad for our first effort. But
I did spot in that first season of qualifying, you did kind of start on row 7 a lot. It's like row 6 and 7 were the ones where you were. That's about where you were.
Yeah, exactly. But when I'm racing him, it's really difficult to race him because it's like, if you're racing someone else, you wouldn't really think twice about throwing one up the inside. And if you rub it, it doesn't really matter. But you go for a lunge on your dad and it's like, what if I mess this up? You know, what if I lock up and I plow straight into his door and take us both out the race? I'll never hear the end of it. I definitely won't be getting a curry on the way back. I'd be told to sleep out in the driveway, you know? So, you know, you do have to think twice about your moves. But luckily, from sort of 2020 onwards, my pace surpassed what he was able to do. And then we weren't really together so much on track. But yeah.
It just took that element of personal jeopardy out of it, which was good. Yeah, I mean, obviously, so we should say the first season, first season was 2018. You came back for more in 2019. And it seemed to be, you know, quite a leap forward, like, you know, in terms of your results and your, you know, and your pace and everything, which you alluded to. Was that purely just through knowing the car and the circuits a bit better and having a bit more time to practice, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, I come back with more confidence in 2019. You know, I knew what to expect. I was still driving my same £4,500 car, so I did end up with a new chassis in 2020. But yeah, this car was a little bit tired, bless her, and yeah, I did start mixing it up more towards the sharp end, and you know, amongst some of the best of the series at the time. And to be honest, the championship I put together in 2019, I was really proud of because I finished 5th in the overall points, but I wasn't finishing 5th, you know, around the races. If you took my average finishing result, it was probably more like 9th or 10th. But because of the consistency and the type of driver I am, I managed to put together a really good championship campaign for the pace I had. And I do liken that to some of the championships I've run in recent years where perhaps I haven't always been the fastest driver week on week, but finishing the races and being consistent kind of pays dividends at the end of the season. So yeah, it's just getting slowly better. And then I managed to finish 2019 with my first podium up at Donington Park as well, which was a little milestone in my career as well, which was nice.
Yeah, I mean, I was just saying, I looked through the results, and it was as like you said. I mean, you had 8th and sort of 10th at Donington, 7th and 9th at Snetterton, 9th and 5th. Got 5th at Croft, and obviously the race pace was there with the practice as well. And you mentioned that Donington round. I saw that your best qualifying to date was 3rd there, and you took 2nd in race 2. And I mean, to be on the podium in a car race for the first time, I mean, you touched on it there, nice little landmark, but it must have felt great, especially towards the end of the season, end the season on a high.
It was
Especially with
massive
eyes looking
because
to the following year.
yeah, I mean, it was massive because at that time, that's the biggest thing I'd ever done in motorsport. I've gone from not racing at all back in 2017 as a golfer that doesn't really want to be playing golf anymore, wants to be racing, to actually having a license and going racing in 2018 and to actually standing on a real life podium in 2019, having just come 2nd at Donington Park against 40 other cars. And for me, that was massive, and it was great to go into that off season on a high that we can take it to the next level and come back next year with a fresh car and try and contend more for podiums and race wins on a weekly basis. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I wasn't new to racing when I come into cars, but having had quite a long time out, it was it was coming back into cars and kind of having to not relearn everything. I had the racecraft from karting, but actually get back into it and consider myself a racing driver again.
Yeah, and then to get that, and then to have that validation right at the end of the season, as you say, it's great to see. Just before we jump on to 2020, I just want to say some folks in the comments. Katie Eames has asked a couple of questions. Katie, good evening. We're going to come and we're going to come to those shortly. One about biscuits, which we like. Just want to say hello to Sheila Kersley from Kersley Motorsport. They're involved in the Junior Saloon Car Championship and in the Coupe Cup, the Hyundai Cup. So do go and check out the Kersley Racing people. They're very good people. And I just see that Sam Wallbank, who also races, evening Sam, he said, just going back to racing your dad and you don't want to put one in his door. He said, the same when you're racing your best mate all the way back from school 30 odd years ago. Yes, don't upset your family and don't upset your old friends when you're racing. Absolutely. So, 2020. Now, I mean, I didn't know until you just mentioned it, but you said you had a new chassis for 2020, which obviously must have given you a boost, especially on the back of the result at Donington. But then COVID hit, and it was all very, very difficult for everyone, and we're very grateful to have come through it. How did that affect you and your preparation for the season? Which feels like a silly question, but
yeah, I mean, we the team that was kind of dominating the championship at the time, KC Motorsport, who ran Stephen Daly, who was a 4 or 5 time champion of the Compact Cup. They built a lot of the cars that were on the grid at the time, so we bought essentially a crashed car that was a fresh car but had been in an accident, so it was reshelled into another brand new chassis by the team, and we sort of picked it up in the winter 2019/2020 before the COVID had all started. So we did actually manage to test it once at Brands Hatch prior to COVID, and then bang, COVID hit. So I've got this lovely brand new racing car sitting there, which costs a little bit more than £4,500, but not that much more. More like what the other cars would cost on the grid. To spend 3 months just going down to the garage occasionally and having a look at it and thinking one day I'll get to race it. But 2020 was a bit of an odd season because it was a short season, especially for the club races. I know like touring cars pretty much managed to squeeze in a full season from August onwards, but we just had once a month. So I think we had 4 rounds that year.
right.
And the championship was still as competitive as ever. And I didn't actually quite get a podium that year, which I was a little bit disappointed in, but I did have many strong showings, like 4th, 5th and consistent results again. But I think we lost an engine around round 3 in practice, which was, it was a competitive engine in the car, and the one we put in was sort of spare, and it didn't quite cut the cake for the rest of the year. So that kind of hurt me a little bit in my results, but I think we come out the championship 6th or something, still out of 35, 40 cars. So it was still a positive step. But we knew that we had the pace in me and the car to definitely make another challenge the following year.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good to have that kind of confidence going into the following year after such a difficult year with the car and obviously with it being the year that it was. One thing I did see was your first ever qualifying result on the front row at Croft. So that's a nice little sort of thing to have, because you said the qualifying wasn't quite as strong as it could have been perhaps previously, and then get on the front row at Croft, new chassis. It's just those little things that you can take from a difficult year, isn't it, that you can take forward, which must have been a big thing. So moving into 2021, just looking at the results, it looked from the outside looking in as kind of a breakout year for you. Obviously, it was the first full season with the new chassis. Were you aiming for a title challenge this time? You know, a third really full season with a new chassis. Were you thinking, right, top end, let's go?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, those cars is quite well known around club racing that it can take a couple of years to learn how to drive the BMW Compact Cup car, because they're a pretty unique thing compared to other more precise racing cars. But yeah, it was definitely the goal was to challenge for wins and challenge for the title that year. And all of my results from the previous year, where I was finishing 5th and 6th and whatever, were turning into 2nds and 3rds, you know, for the majority of that season. I know we're obviously going to come on to Ginetta's in a bit, but that was the start of my first dual campaign, which I was mad enough to do that year, which was a lot of racing. But yeah, from a Compact Cup perspective, I was starting to finish on the podium with more regularity. And actually, yeah, we got a double race win up at Donington, the second to last round of that year. So definitely a breakout year, and we managed to finish 2nd in that championship. Second to, once again, Stephen Daly, who was the biggest thorn in everyone's side in a Compact Cup for a good 5 years or so.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I was just saying, just to backtrack very slightly to the start of that season, and you kicked off with a double podium up at Knockhill, which is a good place to start. Not the easiest circuit to drive for anyone. Excuse me. And then you had what, third and you had another double podium at Snetterton, and 3rd and 4th at Cadwell, and it was just, that must feel great knowing that, you know, there's the ability in the car, the ability in you that early on in the season that, you know, that you are going to have a good season. That must be a huge shot in the arm. And then you mentioned that double race win up at Donington. I saw the timings on one of them, race 1. I think you won by about 9 or 10 seconds or something, which is no mean feat in those cars, is it?
Well, yeah, I mean, the timing sheets don't quite tell the full story, because Lady Luck was on my side that weekend, because I was chasing the championship leader, as I've been doing most of the season. And I was giving him a run for his money. We were pretty close within a second or so. And then on the penultimate lap, his gearbox failed. So we was leaps and bounds ahead of the rest of the field in that race. So I remember that weekend, actually, my dad wasn't there because he had COVID. So I'd gone up there on my own with Scott, who was our mechanic, who used to work for us. And he kind of built our engines and that, because we was fully independent with the running of those cars. So literally me and him and my cousin sort of went up there, the 3 of us. None of us truly knew what we were doing, but, you know, we gave it a good go. And it just so happened that the first 2 wins of my race career were on a weekend, probably the first weekend I've ever had in motorsport where my dad wasn't present at the circuit. So yeah, It was a bit of a coincidence, but he was watching on the stream. But yeah.
That's good. It was a bit of an odd one. Obviously, it would have been very unfair to ban him from coming on the back end of that, wouldn't it? He's like, lucky Omen, you're not here. Obviously, that didn't happen. But he said that you came 2nd overall in that year, which I guess to a point you must have been very satisfied with that. You know, coming 2nd, especially with Mr. Daly being a multiple champion. He took the crown, I believe. But was there a little bit of frustration that you couldn't quite get ahead of him?
I mean, it was always frustrating that, you know, you didn't quite have the pace to beat him. But, you know, I'd never known any different. You know, from the day I started racing Compact Cup, he was always the man to beat. So, you know, it wasn't like I'd really had a taste of victory before that and had it taken away. You know, 2nd or 3rds was the best I've ever done in that championship. So you look from where we started, you know, kind of running in 12th, 13th in the first year, and knocking on the top 10 in the next year, and then it become fifths, top fives, and that. Now we're podiums. So, you know, it was wins was the only thing left, and obviously to get that Donington was, you know, it was another step in the right direction.
Yeah, and it just showed the like progression that you had, as you allude to, with the results getting better and better and better. Win at Donington again, another great way to end the season. We'll come on to 2022 shortly, but you touched on it before. You ran a double campaign 2021 in the Ginettas. That's quite an undertaking. How did it all come about? Because it was with Zentech, wasn't it? Motorsport. How did all that come together?
I mean, so I wanted to, as any, you know, young driver does, they want to move forward and up the racing ladder. And from where I was in rear-wheel drive BMW Compact Cup, I didn't really know what the next step was to take, really. And I've always dreamt of racing on the Toka package and kind of racing on ITV and how cool that would be. And I remember watching GT5 in the COVID year, and I thought, you know, that's probably not a bad way, you know, a relatively lower cost than what the other support series would be, the permanent ones on the Toka package would be. They're rear-wheel drive. They look like really great cars to drive, and the racing was fabulous as well. Yeah, we got talking to. Actually, no, I did a trial day at the end of 2020 with Ginetta up at Snetterton in the pouring rain. I drove a GT5, and it was just a different machine to what I'd been used to. You know, proper racing tyres, sequential gearbox. You know, it was a proper racing car, and I loved every minute of it. And yeah, the plan was actually to race that and not BMWs the following year, but because we'd built up such a nice little thing with me and my dad racing as a pair, it was almost sad to stop doing it. And because the calendars didn't clash, you know, we had the cars, we had all the setup to go and race BMW. So we're like, why don't we just carry on doing it and just see what happens? You know, if I have a particularly poor year, then maybe I'd knock it on the head. But we didn't. You know, it was a great year, and you know, I was getting better and better in the Ginetta all the way throughout the year, learning the racing, the style of racing that's in the cars. You know, getting faster on track. Had a couple of podiums in my first year as well, and raced against some really, really top drivers, and it taught me a lot. So a lot of racing happened for me in that 2021 year.
Yeah, which again makes it kind of more like a breakout year. It's just more track time, more time behind the wheel, different, and as you say, in a proper racing car, so to speak. And again, you mentioned the results. You took a pole at Donington. Now Donington keeps featuring in your list of good results. I mean, and obviously you made your BTCC debut there, which we'll come to. Is it a circuit that you like racing? I mean, regardless of whether it's a BTCC car or a Ginetta or a bit. I mean, is it a circuit that suits you? Do you think?
Do you know what? Donington isn't one of my favourites. I don't dislike any racetrack. I think they're all brilliant, and I enjoy racing wherever I am. But it's definitely not up there as one of my favourites. I do find it a little bit, compared to some of the tracks, a little bit. I think boring's the wrong word. It just doesn't have as much soul and character as, say, the likes of Croft or Thruxton or Brands GP. You know, it's one of those tracks where everyone's good at Donington. It's a bit of a track that's hasn't got that, especially the national layout. I prefer the GP layout actually with the hairpins, but just kind of doesn't have that much variation in corners. It's all quite very fast and flowing. And I just find that there's so much pre-season testing that goes on at Donington. So many do their testing at Donington that everyone's just good at Donington. Whereas when you go to somewhere like Croft, you don't race there so often, and you can have a little bit of advantage if you know some tricks, you know, around the circuit. And I really enjoy tracks like that. So no, it's not one of my favourites to drive, but I've had pretty much all of my career milestones have happened at Donington with regards to podium, pole position, first race win, touring car debut, championship. You know, as we'll come on to. So yeah, I mean it's a special place in that sense. But yeah, I do have better tracks for me than Donington.
Yeah, fair enough. Interesting, because I mean, most drivers say, "Oh, I enjoy racing at any circuit that I do well at," but not always the case, which is good. It's good to hear. On that Ginetta grid, I mean, you came fourth. It's your first season in the series. You came fourth overall, and just looking at who was on the grid that year, you had like Josh Steed, John Bennett, Will Aspin, Magnus quickly. He went on into single seaters and things like that, I believe. Max Coates and Will Orton and others on that grid. So it was a strong grid. So it must have given you a bit of confidence finishing fourth against these drivers who were good then and have continued to progress very well.
Yeah, I mean, like for the first year, I mean, I kind of had top 5 in my brain, and I thought if I could go out and bring it home in the top 5, then that would be a good showing. And then that sets the foundations really well to come back in year 2, having known the car, got used to the style of racing, which, to be honest, is like Ginetta Juniors just on steroids. I mean, they don't take no prisoners out in Ginetta GT5. You're just going a bit faster, and you've got slick tyres over the juniors. But yeah, I mean, most of the drivers on that pro grid were young enough to be in Ginetta Juniors as well. So yeah, it was a fierce grid. But yeah, it taught me a lot, and obviously, come back in 2022 to give it another go.
Yeah, absolutely. Which we're going to get onto very, very short because it will lead us into the BTCC. But again, 2022, you also went back into the BMW Compact Cup. Obviously, 2021 had been a good year, so you stuck with it with 2022. Another double campaign. You kicked off Brands Hatch Indy, double pole, double win to start. Perfect start to the season, isn't it?
So I was adamant over the winter that I wasn't going to race BMW Compact Cup in 2022.
Really?
I'd done my last race in 2021. I was like, right, that's it. I'm going to put all my efforts into GT5 Challenge, and we're going to try and win that title, because that's the one that ideally is matters the most, and it's the higher profile championship. But Stephen Daly didn't return to the Compact Cup for 2022. He didn't fancy winning it for a 6th time. He'd probably got bored of winning. So my dad was like, there's no way that you're not coming back for another season, because this is your perfect opportunity to win the championship. We've been at it for 4 seasons. All of that work we've put in to get up the front, I've got to give it a go to win the championship. And once again, the calendar's pretty much aligned throughout the whole year, apart from the final round where the 2 meetings clashed. So yeah, so I was kind of like, well, what about the last round? And he was like, well, you'll have to just do whichever one you've got a better chance of winning the championship of at the time. So I was like, okay, but it was bugging me all year, and it was on my mind. But yeah, we'll get to that in a moment. But yeah, started off with a couple of wins at Brands Hatch, followed by a triple win at Snetterton as well. It sounds like there was no one left in the series if I kept winning, but no, it was still competitive. But
yeah,
I just got to that point now where suddenly I was the driver to beat, and the one that was getting pole positions and winning races. But yeah, I'd kind of finally conquered the championship at that point.
One thing I did notice on all the results and everything, obviously you had a lot of wins, a lot of success. You were front runner for the championship. One thing that did stand out, and I hate to bring up the bad bit, but Anglesey, you had a DNF at Anglesey. Now I spoke with Joseph Loke recently, and he absolutely loved Anglesey. He thought it was a crazy circuit, and he loved it. Firstly, did you enjoy racing at Anglesey? And second, what happened with the DNF? It was, I think it was the only one of the season, wasn't it? Or the only 2, I think.
Yeah. So my plan for that year was plain and simple. Don't finish outside the top 2 in every single race, and I won't have to race at the final round. Then I can go and race the Ginettas. However, I'd won every race up till Anglesey. Didn't actually win the first race, but it wasn't a disaster because the guy that beat me wasn't running a full campaign. So it was still like a race win. At that point, I'd got a lot better at engineering the car as well with setup and that. So I made a setup overnight, a setup change myself, went out on the Sunday morning, car was flying, got into the lead, was pulling away, had a nice 2-second gap or something to second. And then with about 3 minutes to go, I've come out the first corner, bit of a grind on the engine. All of a sudden it's up in smoke. So I'm pulling over on the side. It's a DNF. I'm like, explicit. That's my whole season plan now of not having to attend the last round done, because you can drop 3 races in that championship. So the last round was a triple header. If I'd have won or come second in every race, I wouldn't have had to attend. Right. So amazingly, the 3 of us that are up there with Scott, my mechanic, and my dad and that, we managed to change an engine in about 3 hours between races 2 and 3 to get out on the grid to start the back for race 3. And although I did actually have an electrical issue and the car kept cutting out, I still come through to finish the race and bag some points. Because if you don't finish the race, you score 0. If you do finish the race, you could still come last and get 15, 20 points or something. So it was essential for my year that I got out and finished that race. And we did that. Probably ultimately won me the championship, doing that. So,
wow. I found that amazing. Of all the wins and the results and everything, it's just something like that. And it's the old adage, isn't it? Every point counts. You just take what you can get and do that. Now, so you're obviously in a very strong position to win the BMW Compact Cup, as we said. We're going to come to the crux of the matter in a minute. But you also, as you said, ran a full season in the Ginettas. And I've got here that you took podiums at Alton and Silverstone, and Thruxton and Croft and Brands, and wins at Brands and Donington, and things like that. Were you not surprised, but did you expect to be, right on it at the championship, fighting for the championship at the top end, having finished 5th? I mean, were you thinking that was a natural step to fight for both championships?
I mean, I knew that this was my year. If I was going to win the Ginettas, that I had to do it this year. But we had another sort of breed of young drivers coming through. We had Will Jenkins out there that year, Harley Horton, who both extremely quick drivers. Will Horton I'd raced against the previous year, but he was in the same boat as me. He was improving and bang on the pace. And there was about 4 or 5 drivers that were extremely talented drivers that I was going to have to beat if I was going to win the championship. And it was actually a year that started on the Ginetta side of things, started quite slowly for me, because in the first race, I made probably the only mistake I made all season in both championships was I spun off on the first lap of the first race at Alton Park on cold tyres and ended up in the gravel trap. So that wasn't the ideal start. But then, like I say, from there, I got a podium in the following race and just started to string together some solid results. But my championship position from as the season started to go on, I was sort of 10th, and then I was 8th and 7th and 6th, and a bit of a dark horse really, because I wasn't really setting the world alight, but just finishing races, just bagging solid points, no stupid crashes or stupid errors or anything like that. And it wasn't really until later in the season that my pace started to shine through, and I started to get some, fantastic results, which helped me get towards a position where I could win the championship in the final round.
I mean, I did see through the results. Obviously, there was a definite upturn in the second half of the season with, as you said, with the pace coming in and the results improving. Now, I'm going to pass this one over to you because you obviously know far more than I do. You were there and you were doing it. You've got a chance of winning both championships, which was obviously, I guess, was a plan to begin with. But you mentioned the final weekend of each season, they clashed. I can't wait to hear about how you got around this. How did it all happen?
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. But I mean, to summarize, and I will tell the story, but I won 2 championships in 2 different series in the same year on the same final weekend at 2 different racetracks. Go figure. Luckily,
those unique. That's got to be.
I can't see that it's ever been done before. I mean, maybe someone's won 2 championships in the same year, but I can't see that they've both been concluded on the same weekend at 2 different tracks where the driver had to attend both tracks to win the championship. But the BMWs concluded at Silverstone on the international circuit, and the Ginettas were at the British GT event up at Donington on the Grand Prix layout. So I had an outside shot at the Ginettas because I'd just won I'd taken my first win actually in the GT5 at Brands Hatch on the GP circuit in the last previous round before that. So I think I was 24 points behind the championship leader going into Donington, and 3rd in the championship. We had Will Jenkins and Harley Horton were both the 2 that were close at the front of the championship. They were teammates for Elite Motorsport. All I had to do in the BMWs was go out in 1 race and finish, I think it was like in the top 28 or something. So I pretty much just had to start, but I still had to do it. Otherwise, there was no guarantee I was going to win.
Yeah.
So obviously my plan of the year had been turned upside down when I blew an engine up at Anglesey and couldn't sew the championship up before Silverstone. So I started off at Silverstone. Oh, I will add, I may or may not have had the timetable work out in slightly my favour for the BRSCC at Silverstone. I won't go into too much more detail, but yeah, let's just say the two races didn't clash. But it made for a fantastic story, and it turned, it made a BTCC driver out of it. But yeah, we started off at Silverstone for qualifying. All I went out and did 3 laps. I made sure I was plumb last. I didn't want to be mixing it up at the front and get sabotaged by one of the other drivers. But I went out, tootled around for 3 laps, came in. We had a motorbike, Honda NT1100 for you bikers out there, which is a big sort of touring bike, waiting in the paddock for me to get on the back of and go up to Donington for Ginetta qualifying. The rider of which happened to be my dad, who was also racing in the BMWs. So he did the full qualifying because he was trying to win the Masters section, which was for over 45s. And I'd come in, I was sitting in my race suit with my helmet on, sitting on the back of the bike, thinking, come on, Dad, come on, we've got a track to get to. So he comes in with his garage into the garage. I'm like, right, yeah, get your gear on. We're up to Donington. So we jump on the bike pretty much while people are still in Parc Fermé for qualifying. And now we're shooting up to Donington. So they're about an hour apart on a bike. So you imagine me sitting on the back of a bike with my full race kit on, my race helmet, my hands device, ready to just jump in another race car at Donington. And then I've gone up there, probably got up there about half an hour before GT5 qualifying commenced. I went out there and put the car on pole. I managed to put it on pole, but literally we'd already arranged with the scrutineer guy that I could get weighed first when I came into Parc Fermé. All they did was weigh me. They knew that they could weigh the car after. So again, after coming in on pole, jumped on the scales. My dad was sitting there on the motorbike, jumped back on the bike and rode off. So left them to do their thing with the car. And now this is where it gets really interesting. So we're riding back to Silverstone, obviously as fast as we can, a little bit over breaking the law, let's say, but there's a lot on the line here. So we're
Saturday evening.
No, Sunday. Oh, no, sorry, Saturday. Yeah, sorry, Saturday morning this is. So we've just done both qualifyings. The BMW race is the first race of the day after the lunch break back at Silverstone. But what they quite often do in club racing, because there's no TV schedule to stick to, is they always run ahead of schedule. So we estimated on our commute that I should get back with about half an hour to spare before the first race. So we've come back down the M1, come off at the A43, gone into Silverstone. And as we're coming round the back entrance, which you have to go to for the international circuit, I've just sensed something myself, and I've gone, something's not right here. We're just in the queue to get in the circuit. And you know the noise that you sometimes hear, like when a car comes in the pit lane to warn that a car's about to enter the pits. It's different at every circuit. I heard that, and there was just this eerie silence about the place. I was like, something's not right here. And I've looked out and there's marshals out on the track. So I'm like, come on, we need to get a move on. So we're going around the perimeter road of the circuit, pretty much flat out on the bike, leaning over. And my younger brother, Isaac, was round at Stowe Corner with his push bike, and he was waving us on. He was like, come on, they're about to start. So this is like 40 minutes before the race is due to get underway. And we've gone riding down the back straight, past the hangar straight, over the bridge. We're coming round and all the cars are in the assembly area with their engines running, waiting to go out on the track. And I'm realizing at this point, I'm absolutely cacking myself. So my dad's going flat out down the paddock, past all the security guards. They're all trying to stop him. We're coming around the corner pretty much with our knee down on the floor. And we've gone scooting down the back of the garages and stopped by where our lorry was parked. And our mechanics come running down the pit lane. He's like, you've got to get in the car now. They're literally going out now. They've been postponing the race by like a minute, because they wanted to run ahead of schedule. And they were like, no, just another minute. They'll be here in any minute. They'll be here any minute. And our championship coordinator, bless him, he was really, really trying to make this work. And I've jumped off the bike. My dad's trying to find his race gear because he's due to be in the race as well. And I'm running down the pit lane like James Bond, like with my helmet on, with my gloves, waiting to get in the car. And as I'm strapping myself in the car, the first few people are going out onto the warm-up lap of the race. So I'm now like panicking, trying to get in my car. All I've got to do is go out and finish, remember? Somehow my dad makes it onto the grid as well, and I don't know how that happens, but he comes shooting past us on the warm-up lap because he didn't quite make it in time. And yeah, so I've gone out there. It's just started to rain as well in the warm-up lap, just to add some more spice to the situation. So I've gone round, very sort of mundane at the back. I'm not trying to race. I'm just trying to finish the race, basically, to do enough. And we get the last lap board. So I go around just one more lap of the international circuit. And then I come down into the final chicane, the Vale chicane. And I'm like, right, I'm about to win my first championship here. And as I come around the final corner, I see the checkered flag. I go to pull fourth gear and the linkage snaps. And I coast across the finish line and break down at the first corner to win the championship. And I can't get my car back to the assembly area. So I'm like, oh my God, if that race had been one lap longer, the whole plan would have been up in the air because I couldn't race both races the following day. There was a clash. So luckily, I rolled across the finish line with a broken car, finished 20, I think 21st or something, which was fine. And then I had to get out my car, push it up the pit lane to get it to the Parc Fermé so they could weigh it and everything. Otherwise, I would have got disqualified. I had people running down the pit lane to help me out. And at this point, my head's all over the place. I'm like, get me out of this place.
This mess.
I'm like, what is going on here? I just want to win this championship and get the hell out of here. So luckily, and then, I'm going mental at my dad. So now we're back on the motorbike. I've won that championship. Back up to Donington for race 1 there. And then I get there pretty much as the previous race is on track before my Ginetta race. I go out to start from pole, and I'd probably drive the best race I've ever done to this date. I defended for pretty much 15 laps of the Grand Prix circuit and won the race. And I left that evening as championship leader from a 25-point deficit due to some shenanigans of the other cars.
Wow.
And that's the most mental day you could ever have in motorsport.
So on Monday, this is the Saturday. Just to recap, you've gone to Silverstone, qualified, got on the bike, hauled it up to Donington.
Qualified
on pole.
Yeah.
Gone back to Silverstone quite quickly. Almost missed the race.
Yeah.
Won the championship, broken down, and gone back to Donington and won.
Yes.
That is absolutely incredible. That needs to be made into a film.
Everyone. I mean, that's the short version of the story. There's a lot more that actually happened, but
sure.
They want me to write a book on it. Like, I don't know, the Chronicles of a Double Champion or something like that. But it's, yeah, I mean, it would definitely be there one day, maybe when I've got a bit more time on my hands. But
that is incredible. That's incredible. That might be the best story I've ever heard. That's amazing. And it had a happy ending just about, but my goodness me.
So
I don't know what to say to that.
When I thought it couldn't get any more dramatic, when I thought it couldn't get any more dramatic, it did the following day, let me tell you. So I've gone into the second race, which is race 2 of the weekend out of 3. And I'm starting on pole because I've won. The second race was your second fastest lap time, in which I was on pole as well. So I had a double pole. But I had my 2 championship rivals starting just behind me. And I had a bit of a scruffy race, to be honest. I lost the lead going into turn 1 and ended up finishing 4th on the road. But the guy that come 3rd was Will Aspin, who'd come back for that event. And he was part of Elite Motorsport, didn't qualify for points. But I tell you now, he was there for one reason, and that was to make sure an Elite Motorsport car won the race. Yeah. Because he was not playing nice to me in race 2. He was in front of me. He was blocking me. He was forcing me to the grass to allow his other 2 teammates to drive off into the distance and settle the championship between themselves. So that caused all sorts of drama in between races 2 and 3 with the organisers, with our team. We weren't standing for it because, it's just not the way you want to see a championship decided.
And it's not really the way to go racing, is it? I mean,
I'm not saying
I'm not trying to throw their driver
under the bus because obviously he just come back to race. But more from the team's perspective. You know, it was kind of win at all costs at that level. But yeah, I mean, we've gone out in the final race of the season, you know, like a classic championship finale, and there was 7 points between the three of us at the front. And I was starting fourth on the grid with my two championship rivals starting 1 and 2, and Will Aspin was starting in third. So I had to get in front of Will by the time we got to the first corner. Otherwise, I was not going to have a chance of winning the championship because he wouldn't let me pass. Luckily, I got an amazing start and managed to get into third position by Redgate. So from that point onwards, there's 7 points covering the three of us. Pretty much whoever won the race out of the three of us would win the championship, bar one scenario. So it was the gloves were off. So we've gone down through the Craner Curves, through Old Hairpin, gone up to McLean's, and I've gone up the inside of Horton for second, who was my closest championship rival. And we've gone side by side out the corner, completed the pass, and then the safety car came out. And now in this configuration with Jenkins leading the race, if I finished second, that was good enough for me to win the championship by a couple of points.
Okay.
So we went green after the safety car, and I tapped Will Jenkins for about a lap, and then I had to defend from Horton, and I kind of lost touch with Jenkins. So I turned my attention solely to defending that second position, race for it like my life depended on it. And to be honest, if you go and have a watch of that race on YouTube, it's probably one of the best championship scraps you will ever see. Me and Horton swapped places a couple of times during that race. And the side-by-side action between us through the Craner Curves and into the Old Hairpin, literally for the championship. Whoever finishes ahead is champion. It was unbelievable. Yeah, it was a fantastic race. And I managed to hold them off for the rest of the race and won the championship on track, which was unbelievable. And at that point, considering the weekend I'd had with all the shenanigans on Saturday, I was just full elation. You know, I lost my voice from shouting so much in the car. Like, I've never felt anything like that slowdown lap at Donington. The relief of the whole season and worrying about that final weekend that I'd actually pulled off the double championship. It was unbelievable.
That's absolute wow. I mean, and that, now I know that's not quite the end of the story, but because I mean, what an incredible weekend. I mean, I've just seen Keith Mail has commented. Evening, Keith. He said he's obviously worked it out. He said between Silverstone and Brands, it's 1 hour 18 minutes, 68 miles between the two circuits, which is going some twice on a Saturday with racing in between, which is very good going. But I need to say something that Mark Wagstaff. Now, Mark runs BTCC Blueprints, who do terrific work. Big fan of their work. So do go and check them out, guys, on Facebook and on their website. He has said, though, he said that what you did was very impressive, but he said it doesn't quite beat Phil Collins and Live Aid at Wembley in Philadelphia. That's a big extreme, that, isn't it?
I mean, he did have a private jet that was probably waiting for him just outside that he could just jump on and get to wherever he wanted. I mean, there was talk of helicopters at some point. Not that I can afford to hire a helicopter, but we thought that maybe the helicopter was going to be the answer. But the thing that actually was put the kibosh on that plan was, well, what if it's windy and the helicopter can't go up? Then I'm knackered. So we were literally willing to throw whatever it took to get that weekend done, to be honest. And whether he was in the crap afterwards, it wouldn't have mattered because it'd have 2 trophies. But yeah, I think what we're about to come on to is another interesting part of the story.
Yes. I was just saying, we did have a guy on here, Mr. Jerry Marnie, ex-BTCC racer who flies helicopters. He would have definitely got you there. If anyone knows Jerry, my goodness. He'd have got you there if it was in a hurricane. Phil Collins had Concorde. Yeah, you can't really take Concorde from Silverstone to Donington. Shame. So yes, right, now we need to get back to the final sort of chapter of this before we get to BTCC. Now, there was legal wranglings, wasn't there, after this Ginetta Championship that you had provisionally won?
Yes. So I mentioned the move on Harley Horton on the first lap just before the safety car came out. So I got protested at the end of the race that I'd overtaken under safety car. Obviously, at that point, it was too late. The race was done. So we got called into the clerk's office. I remember seeing the safety car board, and I was pretty confident that I had overtaken him before then. When we got into the clerk's office, we then noticed that there was another safety car board just between McLean's and Coppice, which I hadn't quite noticed. And
Okay.
luckily for me, I was ahead of him at that point because he raced to the board by no more than a front bumper. Like I was just enough ahead to have completed the move. However, at McLean's corner, just as we were going through the apex of the corner, the marshal on the left-hand side was just about to deploy his yellow flag. Like you could see him reach for it to pick it up, but it wasn't actually being waved over the barrier. And they tried to say that that flag was being waved, therefore I overtook under yellow flags. So a long story short, the stewards of Ginetta, the clerk of the course, declined the appeal that Elite Motorsport filed against me and said that I hadn't completed the move under yellows and it was perfectly legal. So they said, that's fine. We're going to appeal that decision and take it to the race stewards of the meeting. We've gone up there, waited about an hour, gone through the whole same process again. Again, long story short, they've turned around and said, no, you've overtaken under yellows. You've now got a penalty and essentially I've lost the championship. So all of a sudden I'm like, what, what's just happened here? You're saying what? I've lost the championship because there's a yellow flag, which isn't out. So obviously we protested that straight away. And during this year as well, I will mention that I teamed up with Fuchs Sports Management and Will Fuchs, and about halfway through the season with his ambition to want to go to touring cars eventually. And he was very quick-witted and quick thinking in the fact that he got probably one of the best motorsports lawyers on board straight away in Sarah Franklin, Franklin Motorsport Legal, who's actually a sponsor of Aaron Taylor Smith. And got her on board with the case straight away. So we had filed the appeal. We just had to wait for a date at the Motorsport National High Court. And that month was absolute hell. Like I've never been so depressed about motorsport in all my life. That I'd just gone from that massive high to having it taken away from me, in the most cruel circumstances. And we did get a date. We ended up going to the motorsports court. We'd been through the brief time and time again with Sarah. We knew exactly where we were going to come from, and we've gone into the courtroom. We had Ian Watson there, who's the BTCC clerk of the course. We had I can't remember the other guy's name, but he's one of like the president of the BARC or something like that. Okay. And another guy there. So quite high profile people in UK motorsport. And we did the case, and my palms were sweating, to say the least. We're in a proper little courtroom. We've got the big screen up. We've got Elite Motorsport in there saying their side of the story, trying to get me thrown out the championship. And we've got Sarah in there fighting my corner. I've got to speak as well. It was like being in a courtroom going down for something really serious. Is what it felt like. And then they sent us outside after doing the whole case. And about 10 minutes later, we came in, and when they said the words, we find that there's no, whatever they said, that you haven't basically overtaken under yellow flags, and we will be rescinding the penalty, and you'll being reinstated in the results. I've never actually cried before, but I was just like, I couldn't hold myself back. Like the month I'd had up to that point of absolute hell of losing that championship to all of a sudden giving it back. It was like I'd won the championship twice. I'd gone through the emotions of winning it on track, which was really nice. So it's not like I won it in the courtroom. I won it again in the courtroom. And there was a few beers had that night, that's for sure.
Oh, wow. I mean, and especially, given that all that whole process started with the Saturday that you described with the double thing, and then all the touring, the throwing, and then the winning, and then not, and all that. Wow. That's incredible, and it all ended well. But I don't think there could be any more drama to end a championship if you tried. It makes Abu Dhabi 21 look a bit tame, doesn't it?
That was my own version of that. Yeah. Full of controversy.
Absolutely. Just seen a comment from Graham Adamson on Facebook. Evening, Graham. He said, "Yes, very well deserved." Absolutely, that's incredible. That's absolutely amazing. And we're obviously very glad that it worked out well. And the right way in the end. I just want to come to a few comments. We've got very quick. Annabelle Janice Webster. She is the mother of Maggie and Albert Webster. We do wish Albert all the very best. I know he had a big shunt at Donington, and I do hope he's okay. And she has said that Mikey Doble is the best, which is lovely. And we've got Kevin Whitewood, who runs British Touring Car Chat, which I'm sure everyone is aware of on here. Go and check them out over on Facebook. He's just said, yeah, he's okay. So, you know, I don't know, Kev, that's a bit harsh. No, he's joking. I know he's joking. So, yes, quite an end to this season. And obviously that facilitated the move up to the BTCC in part. Did you ever look at anything like the Minis or the Carrera Cup or anything else like that? Or once there was an opportunity to go to the British Touring Cars, I guess it was a no-brainer?
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird one because we didn't think that the touring cars was going to happen that year.
Okay.
I'd always aspired to be in the touring cars one day, but we thought it was realistically a 2 to 3 year plan from that point forward. So, you know, with myself and my dad and Will Fuchs, we were kind of looking at options in TCR UK, which was looking like a championship that was on the rise at the time, and you know, a stepping stone to perhaps touring cars. And you know, it's front wheel drive machinery. I needed to learn that. I'd never raced front wheel drive before. And yeah, we thought TCR was going to be on the British GT package for the following year, so it would have had some pretty deep.
I think we may have frozen. We may have got a bit of a freeze here, folks. I'm sure it'll right itself. It always does. This is the thing with doing a live chat. We are at the mercy of the internet. Oh, hang on a second. If we've got audio and camera, we're a bit... Oh, he's gone. He's going to come back. I'm just going to bring him back in. This does happen on live chats. It's what makes it so much fun. There we are. We're back again. Hey, good stuff. Sorry, yes, we got as far as TCR almost being on the GT.
Yeah, that's it. So when Ginetta came away from Toka, they kind of occupied all the spaces on the British GT package. So, you know, from the conversations we'd had with teams, the cost of TCR UK is actually really high, a lot higher than people think. And just didn't really fancy it because it was like, you know, we've got to try and raise all this budget by trying to get sponsors in on something that wasn't really on a very high profile package. It didn't have the television coverage. And we're like, you know, we're trying to raise almost BTCC figures for racing that's live streamed on YouTube, you know, as opposed to touring cars and everything it comes with. And I was out walking the dog one day, and I text Will and I was like, do you think it'd be crazy if we actually started talking to BTCC teams now and just thought, you know, would anyone be up, you know, would I be on the market? Would anyone fancy having me as a driver? And he started speaking with Adam from Power Max Racing, and
Adam Weaver, isn't it? Yeah,
Adam Weaver, yeah. And you know, he expressed an interest in me as a driver, you know, quite early on in the conversations with Will, and you know, that took me by surprise a little bit. You know, I thought, you know, why would someone want a club racer, which is pretty much all I was at the time, and I'd won a couple of championships, to drive his car? But I think they'd come off the back of a subpar sort of season, and they wanted a bit of a change up for the following year. And yeah, so we got talking, and at one point we was sort of talking, and then it wasn't going to happen because we couldn't find the funding. And then they went away and signed another driver in Andrew, and then it kind of went quiet for a little bit, and I didn't know what I was going to race. And then we did have a commitment from one sponsor, which was, but not really enough to warrant a season in touring car. And we had another sponsor we were talking to who kind of verbally told me that he'd probably go ahead. And then at that point, I'd text Adam again, and I said, oh, you know, we hadn't spoke for probably about 3 or 4 weeks at this point. I said, oh, you know, about the touring cars, is there still a conversation to have? And he said, oh, Mikey, you know, we've just signed another driver now. You know, you haven't suddenly come up with a budget or something, have you? And I said, well, not exactly, but it might have been worth a conversation. And then that's where the third car came from. So the following morning, me and my dad were like,
it was Aaron who had gone in, I assume, with
yeah. So the following morning, we got in the car. We went up to Adam's place for the second time up at PMR. Will came up as well, And we were just kind of like sitting in the office talking about it. And he said, do you want us to leave you to it for a little bit? So we had a chat amongst ourselves and we was like, right, what do? We make the decision now. It's now or never. Just come off the back of a double championship win. We're just going to have to wing it, basically. That's all we did. And then we kind of had a bit of a Del Boy moment. It was like, come on, we can do this. We can make it happen. We called them back in and just said, yeah, we'll do it. And from that moment forward, I was a touring car driver, and I was like, I was in shock all the way home. I was like, what have we just done? 2 days ago, we was looking at, I don't know, BMW Compact Cup, whatever, I don't know. And all of a sudden, we're going to be announced as the British touring car driver, which was, career goal for me. It went from there.
That's amazing that it happened. I don't want to say last minute because that makes it sound a bit rubbish, a bit dodgy. But it's just amazing that it was a case of, well, yes, no, maybe, yeah, go on then, and it just kind of happened.
I mean, credit to the team as well that they believed in me enough as a driver to go through all the stress of building a third car, which they did have there. They had the shell there; it was their spare car, but they'd never actually raced it, so they've only ever ran 2 cars. They went to all the efforts of pulling in more staff, another engineer, all the parts to build the car, and got it out and up and running in time for media day with relatively little notice. That was a cracking job by the team, and I'll obviously be forever grateful for giving me that opportunity to make my step into the BTCC.
And I guess the nice thing is, as you alluded to it, it's a nice show of faith in you, isn't it? It's saying that this guy's obviously got enough that we can put a whole, basically expand the team by 50%, just for this guy to come and race, which is, I mean, I say it must have felt so surreal. You touched on it driving home, thinking, I'm a BTCC racer. I mean, it must have been amazing. To wake up the following morning and go, did that happen?
Yeah, of course, I couldn't tell anyone for at least another 3 weeks really after that. But
yeah,
you bet my bottom dollar I wanted to jump on the roof and shout it from the rooftops and tell about every person I knew. But you have to resist the temptation until it's your turn. But yeah, it was pretty special. And then obviously what followed from then was a season of touring car.
Wow, that's fantastic. I love that. That's great. There's a few comments coming in, which we're going to come to, folks. Don't worry. So when you, when you first got in the car and drove it, not in anger, obviously for the first round, but first time you did a test or media day or things like that, what did you think of the car? Because obviously I've spoken to most of the British touring car grid and some guys who've raced in the past and things, and they said that a British touring car is incredibly difficult to drive, if you're going in, even if you're going in from minis or something like that. How did you find it going from the Compact Cup and Ginetta's into a fully blown touring car?
It frightened the life out of me before I'd even got out the garage on the first test day. I'm sat in the car and I'm like, you've got such, I describe it to people like you've got such responsibility when you're driving that car to do everything that's required for that car to work. You've got to keep an eye on all of the alarms and the temperatures on the dash. You've got the team radio, which I'd never had before. You've got the pit limiter, you've got the hybrid, you've got different engine maps, you've got the cooling map, which brings the water temperature down, the exhaust gas temperature down before you can turn it off. Like, there's so much responsibility that goes into you as the driver, to make sure that the car is going to do its thing when it's on the track. And I was thrown in the deep end really, because I hadn't really had much time to prepare. And all of a sudden I'm sitting in the car on my first day and they're like, can you check the brake bias? And I'm like, I haven't been shown how to check that. What do you mean? I can press the down and he was like, oh yeah, you just have to wait till you put this amount of pressure in and then it will read that number and read it back to me. I was like, okay. I didn't have a clue. All these things that are now second nature, all the buttons. I'm like, what does that one do? What's that? And I'm about to go out and do 140 mile an hour around Snetterton whilst thinking about all these buttons, but the car is absolutely fantastic to drive. Like, it's just, from the moment you get in it, what it looks like from the outside is exactly what it feels like on the inside.
Right.
And it sounds amazing. It's as quick as anything. It moves about. It drifts around the corner while it's got insane amounts of grip. You're just on the edge absolutely everywhere. And, it's just everything about it is so pure. It's just an unbelievable car to drive. And to be honest, from every session I did in it and every day, I enjoyed it more, because at the beginning, there's a bit of fear in, what if I'm not good enough? What if I can't actually drive this? So I've bitten off more than I can chew. And then, when I first went out, I was nowhere near. On my first session, I was probably 5 or 6 seconds off the pace around Snetterton, but then the next session became 2 or 3, and then the day after that, I was within a second, and then by the time you get to the first round, and you're there, but I wasn't there at the press of a button. I mean, I'd never driven anything as powerful as that before. I mean, a Ginetta's 12 seconds a lap slower than a touring car, so just actually getting used to driving a proper, powerful race car like that was new to me. Everything else had been underpowered that I'd driven. So yeah, it's fantastic.
That's properly in at the deep end, isn't it? That especially with it happening so relatively late in the off season, and you can just see a little half smile on your face just when you're talking about the car, which is a lovely thing to see. Just very quickly on the Astra itself, obviously it's been around the block a few times, and every year, well, certainly the last 2 or 3 years, people say PMR needs a new car. The Astra's getting old. The Astra's getting old. What? And I've spoken with Aaron on here, and spoke with Michael Crease, who drove it as well. He said that in theory it is an old car, but the whole thing's pretty much new, isn't it? I mean, they've had so many updated and so many updates and changes to it, and it's still a fantastic car, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, a British touring car is a living organism, really. I mean, it's never the same parts that come back on it the following year. It might look the same, and it has to remain the same model, but although it, only the middle bit is the original part of the car. Everything else would have been changed several times, and it's been developed and it's been re-engineered, and it's had money spent on it, and it's nothing like the same car that rolled out at probably Brands Hatch in 2017. It's they're constantly they're constantly developing and moving forward with the times. I mean, I'd say the only if there was a point on the fact that it's an old car, is you look at a lot of the modern British touring cars now, and you see it on the road as well. They're much more aerodynamic than perhaps some of the older cars. So the Astra is a little bit more brick-like in its appearance, perhaps compared to, say, the Hyundai Hyundai 30N Fastback, which is as slippery as anything. That's very much the modern touring car style. Is they're very pointy and they cut through the air. So there probably is a little bit of ground to say that it maybe isn't as aero efficient in a straight line as some of the other cars, but it's a solid car. They know what they're doing with it. It very rarely, touch wood, breaks down. They know when they make a setup change what it's going to do. We're not really learning with it. We're just trying to refine it. And we know that there's still a lot of life in the car, and we can still get wins and podiums out of it. So yeah, I mean, in British touring cars, I mean, we saw with the Honda FK2, that first debuted in 2012, and it came out the series in 2020, I think, or 2021, in fact.
It was 20. Yeah, it was either 20 or 21, wasn't it? Yeah, because obviously,
and that car came back as 2 or 3 different guises. We had the original Civic when they first went to NGTC, then it come back as the Civic Tourer with the estate back on it, and then it became the FK2 Type R. However, the chassis remained the same. It was still the same car, just kept coming back as something different. So, you can never do that with a TCR car. A TCR car has 3 years, and then they bring a new generation out, and then it's finished. A British touring car can go on and on as long as the regulations stay the same. So, yeah, I mean, it is the oldest car on the grid, the Astra, but it's only 2 years older than the BMW. It's only 1 year older than the Honda FK8, which sadly isn't out this year. The newest car on the grid is the Cupra, and people have got their opinions on that car as well for other reasons. So it's not always about what is the newest car is the best. So
yeah, exactly. And I do love the Astra. I don't know why, I've always liked it, even when PMR first got it. It was a cracking car. We've got Mr. Lewis Doble has tuned in, and he said that realistically it isn't an Astra. Yeah, true. It's just that little middle bit, and the rest of it is all
You're not wrong.
Space age stuff. So obviously going into your first season, fairly late in the off season, you come into the BTCC. I guess you didn't have time to formulate any expectations. I mean, you said you were just sort of getting on the pace through testing. But I guess a Jack Sears trophy was in the back of your mind. You think, well, I'm eligible for it. Was it a case of let's see how we can go in that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Jack Sears trophy was something that was realistically in my grasp. I just wanted to come out initially and hold my own. Like I didn't want to go out and people think like, who's this mug that's signed himself up for British touring cars and isn't of a standard to be out there, and to get that off to a good start with that independence win at Donington, was such a good confidence boost for me because I felt like a proper touring car driver after that, and from that point onwards, it was just building confidence and finishing more races. And as the season went on, a little bit like really when I started BMW Compact Cup, I started at a point in the championship where I was finishing kind of between 15th and 20th in the first couple of rounds, and then that became 15th to 12th, and then I started accumulating more points finishes, and to the point where I was winning Jack Sears trophies and sort of sneaking into the top 10 occasionally. I think the big turning point for me was in round 4 last year when I qualified 4th, because I hadn't done anything like that up to that point. I'd qualified 16th at Snetterton, and that was my best show in the round before. So to pull a lap out the bag at Thruxton and put it 4th on the grid was quite special. And I think at that point I kind of put my stamp on myself as a driver in the touring cars.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to quickly backtrack, I mean, that first round at Donington, we all know, much like this year, it was wet and changeable and horrible and the kind of stuff that either half the drivers will love and half the drivers will hate. It wasn't the best conditions for you to make your debut in the British Touring Car Championship. And you obviously finished well in that first. Finished well in that first round. But race 2. It threw it down, didn't it? It was. We all saw the conditions and drivers coming in for different tires and strategies and things like that. When did you make the call, or who made the call? I mean, were you How did it all happen in race 2 that put you in that position where you could go and get the result that you did?
The team left it for me to make the call because I was the only one that was really out there and could actually feel what the conditions were like.
Sure.
There was a few cars that opted to go in the pits on the first lap. Like as we come round to start the race, they drove straight in the pits and got on the wet tyres. That was the correct call if you wanted to win the race. However, on lap 1, there was a safety car. So we'd gone round, and as I was going round, you could start to see tyre tracks on the tarmac. And I'm like, no, if we're going to go onto the wets, we've got to do it now. Otherwise, we're not going to have a chance. So I'm really surprised that more cars didn't peel into the pits at that point. But I was one of 3 cars that came into the pits under the safety car to change for wets. And I was the only one of the 3 that did the pit stop and managed to get out before the safety car, not go a lap down. So that was the key to me getting a good result in that race. And then obviously I caught up to the back of the train and we went green. And then you feel like Superman, everyone else is on the wrong tyre. And you're carving your way through the field, like a seasoned veteran, which I wasn't. And all of a sudden they come over the radio and they're like, you're P7. I'm like, wow, P7. So, and the leaders had sort of gone because they'd made the decision at the beginning, and I was catching up Nicholas Hamilton. And bit by bit, I was catching him up, kind of like half a second here, half a second there, to the point where on the last lap I caught him up. And little did I know at the time that this was for the independent win. It's probably suffice to say that I wasn't the most popular driver around Donington that day, with the fairy tale story that could have been if Nicholas had won the race. But obviously I'm there for myself, and it's my second BTCC race. So I was going to go for what I could. And I made the move on him into McLean's corner on the last lap. Had to defend for the rest of the lap. He did fight back and came across the line. They said, P6 on the road and an independence win. And all of a sudden, I'm standing on the podium next to Tom Chilton, Adam Morgan, and I think Ronan Pearson, but he actually lost.
Ronan was there and he got,
he lost his result due to ride-out failure. But I mean, it was a pretty surreal experience at that point, I must say.
That must have been incredible, though. In your second race, first weekend, I mean, you can't have. I mean, obviously, you hope for good things to happen like that, but you obviously can't expect it to happen. And also, just to touch on Nick Hamilton, there was still loads of love for him as well. I don't think anyone really thought any ill of you in that situation. Absolutely not. But what a fantastic start to the, to your your time. Obviously, the weather played a part and everything, but and then just obviously to move on, you had a good solid run through Thruxton and Alton. And you mentioned qualifying fourth at Thruxton. I spoke to, I think it was Michael Creech the year before, and he said that the Astra and just the way the car is really well suited to Thruxton. Did you find that on that lap that you pulled in and taking it round Thruxton for the first time? Did you feel that it was?
Yeah, I mean, Thruxton is a track I've always said is my favourite circuit. I absolutely adore the place. It suits my style, fast circuit. I love it. And the fact that the Astra goes extremely well around Thruxton was a good match, really. And I'd gone out in qualifying and I was in practice, and I was finding my bearings. I wasn't really setting the world alight. I was kind of P15, P16, but I knew that I had a lot more time in the car. It was more me building confidence with how fast the car can really go around the track. And then it got to qualifying. I was in about P18 or something after the first run. And I said, what do I need to get me to the top 10? And my engineer said 3 tenths or something. So I've gone into the complex and I thought that felt really, really good. And as I've come out on my Delta, I'm 3.5 tenths better off already. So I was like, okay, this lap's going well. And I've gone round the left-hander of Doble and into Goodwood. And it felt to me like I'd gone through there twice as fast as I'd done any other lap. I just kind of send it in and hope it stuck. And I've come out the corner sideways. I've looked on my Delta and I'm now 7 tenths up on my best lap. So I'm like, right, I've got one more corner, one more fast corner to not go off track. Did church and a hybrid. And I actually played the chicane quite conservative because the tyres had moved and I didn't want to get track limits. So I kind of just tootled around the chicane and come over the line. And before I'd even got to the first corner, my engineer shouted over the radio, he was like, P4, P4. I was like, what?
Wow.
I went pretty much 8 tenths quicker than I'd done in any other lap. And I just did a wonder lap and put it. But that's the lap I knew I had in me in the car. It was just unlocking it in me. And you don't get much time to practice in touring cars. By the time you've done all your housekeeping in FP1, realistically, over the course of 2 sessions, it's 40 minutes. So that's not really long enough for a rookie to learn the car and the track combination perfectly. So.
Which makes it even more amazing to have found 7 tenths before you get to church, which that's incredible. I do love church. I've done a couple of track days and it's just absolutely fantastic corner, isn't it? Off camber, downhill, fast. Yeah, absolutely love it. I think someone's saying about the camera freezing a bit. KTE just said, kick everyone in the house off the internet. It's fine. It's not bad. It's not bad at all. And just to sort of wrap up that first season, what have we got here? Let's have a look. You took 9th and 12th and 11th at Knockhill. A tricky circuit, elbows out, lots of very punchy circuit, and to be around the, the cusp of the top 10, it's a good place to be there. We've got to touch on Silverstone though, because that lap for pole. I spoke with Tim Harvey on the Sunday morning and he said he was smiling about, there you go. Excellent. I spoke with Tim Harvey on the Sunday morning and he said he was smiling about that lap all of Saturday evening because he said he just absolutely loved watching it. You must have known it was a good one, just like the one at Thruxton.
Yeah, I mean, we was quick at Silverstone all day. I came out, I was like 5th in FP1, 8th in FP2, and I knew that we had the pace in the car. Got through to the top 10 shootout for the first time of that season. And I just thought, I think we got a shot at pole. And I went out, kind of did our prep laps, building the pressure into the tyres and everything. And I went round, did my first flying lap, put it to P1, which was the quickest anyone had done all weekend. And then I did the following lap and went slightly quicker again. And I think it turned out that almost both laps were good enough for pole. And then I think Turkington put it to P2, which would have just pipped my first pole lap. But yeah, and then you're kind of driving around for the last couple of minutes, like where everyone's tyres had gone. And my engineer was like, yeah, you're still pole, mate. You're still pole. And I was like, this is the most surreal thing I've ever known, ever, that I'm now potentially going to be on pole in touring cars. And it's not like winning a race. There's only 10 opportunities to qualify on pole each year as opposed to 30 races. So especially with the added substance of the story that Napa had claimed every other pole position on that season. You know,
with what Napa were doing that year in qualifying was unreal, wasn't it? So, wow.
Yeah, I mean, and then obviously what followed the following day wasn't so great, but yeah.
I mean, obviously we'll come back in just a second. But I mean, did you sort of look on like either the website or on social media and like qualifying results? It's like Mikey Doble, Colin Turkington. Did you think, crikey, that's pretty cool? You must have thought that was a pretty cool thing to see.
It was probably arguably the four biggest names in British touring cars, the modern era, were starting second, third, fourth, fifth. You know, I think we had Colin Turkington in P2, Tom Ingram maybe P3, Ash Sutton P4, and Jake Gill P5. It was like, it's not like it was it's not like they're sort of back in 18th and it was a wet qualifying. It was like a proper dry qualifying, and you've got the best in the business starting right behind me, and there's me at the front. You know, I had to take a picture of the ITV leaderboard after and see my name sitting above those. It was unbelievable. Yeah, definitely a highlight of 2023.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously sitting on the grid and everything. Obviously, you touched on it. What happened on the Sunday wasn't quite so good. I must admit, I was there. I was actually I'd been invited by Goodyear to do some bits and pieces for them, which is very nice. And I was in the hospitality bit. And I hadn't even clocked with what had happened on the warm-up laps, plural. Obviously, we don't want to dwell on it because it was a real shame what happened. But what actually happened? Because it was supposed to be, was it 2 formation laps, and then they shortened it to 1 or something, wasn't it? There was something about how the number of green flag laps, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, so it was 2 warm-up laps of the grid, but obviously Silverstone being quite a short circuit, and the fact that the conditions were changing on the grid, you'd kind of, it wouldn't be unheard of to have 2 green flag laps in that situation. So we was on the grid, and then deciding what tyres to go on. It was one of those sort of wet, dry races. And then as we pulled away, and I've gone round Copse on the first warm-up lap, which should have been the only warm-up lap, I said, can you just tell me exactly how many warm-up laps this is? Because I wasn't quite sure. And, I was told over the radio that it was 2. And then I had another guy come over the radio and tell me it's 2. Because I think at one point, Toka were doing 2 green flag laps, but then they changed it to 1. So I didn't really think much more of it, because I thought, I've been told it's 2. It's raining. It's a short lap. It's probably 2 laps. And then it wasn't until I came over the start-finish line, I thought something's a bit weird, because they normally throw the checkered flag when you do 2 warm-up laps. They normally show the flag. But then I did also think that normally when you start on pole, there's a couple of marshals standing at the front of the grid, which little did I know they don't do in touring cars. They do in every other form of racing, but I've never started at the front of a touring car race, so I didn't really know. So I've gone driving round, and then I'm like, I've gone round Copse really slowly, and I'm thinking, why isn't anyone following me? And then I get a shout over the radio, floor it, and you'll be able to start the back. So I was like, oh, yeah. So I drop it down a gear, and I pretty much go flat out round to try and catch up. It was just a genuine mistake. Look, I mean, the team, they called me in after, and they said, look, we're really, really sorry. We thought it was 2 laps. That's on us. And I didn't hold any grudge against them for it, because no. We'd achieved such a great thing on the Saturday, and that's the last thing that anyone in the team would have wanted, is to do that. And, we still came back strong and finished 11th in that race.
It was a cracking drive. It was.
So we salvaged something, and then got 2 more points finishes for the rest of the day. So it wasn't a bad weekend all in all. It's just a shame that obviously that happened, and I didn't get the opportunity to at least start the race from pole. I was on the wrong tyre anyway, so I probably wouldn't have won, but it would have just been nice to start from pole.
Yeah, well, we'll just have to do it again this year. That's the plan. And just to some of the season, I mean, you had from the 30 races, you had 16 points finishes, 4 Jax's trophy wins. I mean, you must have been happy with that, and also the pole and everything. You must have been happy with the first season. Yeah.
I mean, I surpassed my expectations for the year. I didn't expect to get so many overall points finishes as I did. I was really pleased to get over a 50% record on points finishes. Obviously, 3 top 10s in qualifying, which was really good. 2 Jax's trophy wins, an independent win, and obviously I pushed the Jack Sears title all the way to the final round, and I think
Yeah.
I probably would have had a really good chance of winning it if I didn't get fired off in race 1 at Brands Hatch to end the season. But yeah,
Yes.
it's the way it
Yes.
goes sometimes. But yeah, I was really, really, pleased and proud of the effort we put into it for someone that is, people wouldn't have expected to see on the grid to start with, let alone be competitive, So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It was certainly very, very impressive first season. I think a lot of people thought that about you and about Andrew. Both rookies in the team and both doing what you did was terrific. And this year, obviously, no reason to go elsewhere team-wise, I assume, and it's been a pretty solid start, isn't it, this year?
yeah, I mean, I was kind of, we kind of agreed with the team that I'd do it for 2 years as a kind of a deal for running 3 cars. So I was actually contracted for 2 years anyway, but contract or not, I still wasn't looking elsewhere to come back with anyone else in my second season. I mean, why would we? We've had a cracking first year. The team were operating at a really high standard, and they had plans to move it forward up a notch into this year. So for continuity, I knew the car was still competitive. They wanted us drivers back, which was reassuring to hear as well. And we sign again and do it again this year, and try and build on the results we had last year and go a step further and win the Jack Sears and challenge Aaron for the Independence title as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and as I said, it's been a strong start for you, and obviously at Donington, real on and off weather situation there, 12th, 13th and 13th. You've had 13th, 9th and 15th this weekend. So it's all sort of going in the right direction. Just a very quick word, though, on Donington. There was a lot of, it was kind of 50-50 across the fans on social media and everything when there was the delay and things like that. Someone came on the page and said, oh, they should just start racing. If you can't race in the rain, you shouldn't be racing and all that kind of stuff. But it was the right thing to do, wasn't it, to delay it? I mean, you could see the rivers that were running down Craner and into the old hairpin and stuff. And those sighting laps must have been tricky for you as drivers.
Yeah, I mean, it had rained for so long that morning and so heavy that even though it had stopped raining at that point, the amount of water that was on the grass was flowing like a river onto the track at the bottom of the Craner curves. So whilst the rest of the track was absolutely fine, there was a couple of effectively rivers running across the track that was undrivable. When we did those sighting laps, we were coming down there at 50% speed and we're still aquaplaning off into the gravel trap. So if it wasn't for that, we could have gone racing probably on schedule, but we had to do something about those rivers. Otherwise it would have just been a bit of a farce, really. It would have been a race of survival rather than actually racing. But rather like in F1 when you get a rain delay because it's too heavy, and then as soon as they go out to start the race, they're on intermediate tyres, and you kind of think, well, what are the wet tyres for? By the time we got out, it started drying, and it almost became like you were going offline to cool your wet tyres down. But it was more to get rid of those rivers, to be honest. I personally think in hindsight, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, we probably could have gone racing 45 minutes to an hour sooner than we did. But they did have the mini challenge race out before us. But we still got 3 races in. I know some of the support races didn't manage to have their second race, but I think Toka made the most of a difficult situation. And, it was a fantastic start to the year for the championship. I mean, the racing was certainly worth sticking around for. I mean, I thought it was brilliant racing as a fan,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Hats off to the to the organisers on the day, and also a huge thumbs up to all the workers at the circuit. I mean, we saw them digging up the turf to get the rain off and everything like that. They did, so all the workers at Donington and all the Orange Army, as we know, who all did fantastic work. To, just to get the racing going, which was great to see. So I just thought it's flown by yet again. These things always do. Well, it feels like it has anyway. I hope it has for you as well. I just want to touch on some general sort of talk about some about the touring cars, and the one that's come up in the pre-season, and I've been misquoted and things. I've got a bit of grief for things like this. All misquoted, missing my point, but never mind. It's all fun. the big thing around it was the size of the grid and the cost of running. And drivers who have been on the grid for a few years now, not on the grid this year, just guys like guys and girls like like Jade Edwards and Dan Lloyd and George Gamble, and obviously Rory Butcher's he's departed for different reasons. There are some drivers who were struggling to get the funding out, the funding and the backing and the sponsorship, or whatever you want to call it, the partnerships. Just how difficult is it out there at the moment? And this is not, before we go any further, this is not me having a pop at the BTCC. This is just the UK financial climate as it stands. People don't want to be spending money on things they don't need to be. But just how difficult and how different is it to how it was maybe a couple of years ago?
I mean, I think trying to get sponsorship at the moment is like trying to get blood out of a stone. I mean, it's the hardest task you could ever set yourself to do. At the moment, it's so demoralizing because you're sending email after email, you're adding people on LinkedIn, you're trying to send messages just to try and basically put the feelers out there. And it's not like you're sort of putting your hands out asking for donations. You just want to see if anyone would have any general appetite to get involved in something like this. And I think really to find a sponsor that's going to be sustainable in the championship, they've got to have some kind of passion for motorsport. I think approaching a company that has values about being carbon neutral and they don't have any interest in motorsport whatsoever, you're never going to get anywhere with them. It's got to be someone that has an interest or a passion for motorsport. You look at the sponsors that come back year on year into BTCC, and you can pretty much bet that the owner or director of that company comes to each event and absolutely loves it.
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying that it's got no commercial value whatsoever, but trying to get through to these people to actually put your point forward, because the hardest bit is actually starting the conversation and getting yourself in front of them. If you can actually have a meeting with someone, and it means that they've generally invested in what you're about to sell them already, and your chances of success are significantly higher than kind of sending an email to sales at blah blah blah.co.uk where that the person that receives it is just going to put it straight in the spam. So it's a really, really tough job, and I can totally see why the grids are down this year, but I don't think the racing's going to be any worse because of it. And from what I've seen so far, it's the best racing we've probably had in the hybrid era, really. So,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's been a terrific start to the season. And I just think it's interesting. It's almost a case of being a bit more choosy with who you approach, even though you can't afford to be choosy. It's that kind of a weird sort of balancing act, isn't it?
There's a bit of luck involved, really. If you send 50 emails out, if one of them lands in front of a complete motorsport fanatic that has got a successful business and they've got flexibility to spend and invest money on what they want, then you might get lucky and get a nice chunky sponsor. But show me where they are and I'll get on to it tomorrow morning, because I don't know where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely not that easy, is it? Just in a comment from Chaos Cole, who's been on here for a chat before. She's out in Ireland. She's racing karts and F1000. She said that she's finding it very hard to get sponsors lately, especially out in Ireland where it's mostly football and hurling, etc. They don't really understand motorsport unless they've got a passion for her as a driver or for motorsport, as you say. So it's at all levels, isn't it? It's at all levels. So we'll come to that very, very quickly. Because I got misquoted. Basically, I did a little chat thing, and I said if I was one of the drivers who was struggling for sponsorship, I would be going to the TCR, even though there's less money for your racing. It's that little bit, they can get a bit back, and that's what I'd be looking at, because that's just my thoughts, and that turned into me hating the BTCC.
There we have it. The elephant in the room.
BTCC dying on his backside. It was like, I didn't say that. It's not what I meant. But anyway.
You just let it slip. The three letters TCR. We knew that was going to be coming out in this conversation, and it's a hot touring car debate, really. But
red rag to a bull, that, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Especially on social media.
Yeah, my goodness, I got a clobbering for that. But basically, because I sort of said that if I was struggling for funding, I'd probably go down the TCR route for this season, and that turned into me hating the BTCC after 38 years of following it. Hey ho, never mind. So I just got that
How
off my
could
chest.
you?
I've got that off my chest. Yeah, okay. Well, let's have a little sort of chat about motorsport. I mean, I know you're a motorsport fan and stuff. Are you an IndyCar fan? Obviously, big race coming up, Indy 500. I'm a huge fan of IndyCar. Is that something you follow?
I don't watch all the races, I must admit, but I always make an effort to watch the Indy 500. I believe is it next weekend or the weekend after?
It's Sunday week. Yeah,
Sunday week, yeah.
26th.
So obviously I'll be racing at Snetterton that day, but I'll definitely be taping it and watching it when I come home, or watching it on Monday morning if I haven't fallen asleep Sunday night. But yeah, I think it always throws up a bit of a surprise, doesn't it? The Indy 500, and normally an overtake in the last couple of laps of the race. And was it last year? It was the 1 lap shootout after the safety car. The red
So they
flag.
they threw the red flag a bit late. So I went in 2022. I'd finally managed to get there, and it was absolutely phenomenal. And if anyone ever has the opportunity to go the Indy 500, do it. They don't call it the greatest spectacle in motorsport for nothing. It's fabulous. But yeah, there was a red flag with about 7 laps to go, and we had a 3 or 4 lap shootout in 22. But I think it was a bit late last year. They could have thrown the red flag, but anyway,
Well,
it was a 1 lap shootout.
The worst bit about IndyCar is that they don't do green white checker finishes like they do in NASCAR. So in NASCAR, you don't ever have a race that finishes under the yellow flag unless the crash happens on the last lap. So what they'll always do is they'll throw the safety car out, and then they will have like a 2 lap shootout. So green flag, the white flag, and then the checkered flag. Whereas IndyCar, you could have a 197 laps into a 200 lap race, shaping up to an exciting finish, and some backmarker lobs it coming out of turn 4, and that's it. The race ends under caution. They should put an extension onto the race so everyone gets a green flag finish. Otherwise, it can be a real anticlimax.
Yeah, well, exactly. And that, I mean, because when we were there, I said the one thing I didn't want it to finish under yellow, and it kind of did, but they threw the yellows just as the leaders were coming out of turn 4, and Marcus Ericsson was already ahead. But yeah, in the past they've ended under yellow, and I always thought that must be a real anticlimax. You sat through 200 laps, and then all of a sudden, you're just trundling around for 3 laps and in formation. But hey ho. But yeah, it should be good. I'm looking forward to it. Elliot Faggoter on Twitter, is this a live chat for the stream? Yes, it is. Hello. This is live, and we're being recorded as well. So hello, Elliot. We are winding down though, but this has been recorded, and you can watch it on Facebook in the video section, and on our YouTube in the live section. You can watch it back. Okay, what else we got? Okay, Andretti F1. I know you're a motorsport fan. This has got to happen, isn't it? We need Andretti in F1, or we need someone in F1.
Yeah, I mean, the grid's been quite stagnant now for a good 10 years or more, isn't it? We used to have a bit more chopping and changing on the teams, but I think that it would be good for F1, especially to have an American team on the grid, considering how big the sport is now becoming in America. We've got 3 races over in the USA now versus 10 years ago. I don't think you had any, but just before the circuit of the Americas, there was a bleak period where F1 was pretty much non-existent in the USA, and now, particularly in the Verstappen Hamilton era of Formula One, it's just and obviously Drive to Survive, it's blown up over there. And you look at the crowds that they get in at Circuit of the Americas, and it's big. It's almost like Indy 500 crowds. It's absolutely huge. So they're fully invested in the sport now, and I think they need to have an American team and bring some American blood into the series, because that sounds really bad to call F1 a series. It's a bit bigger than that, but to actually, rather than the drivers all coming through F3 and F2, maybe get a couple of IndyCar champions like Alex Palou or some of those drivers that are driving for McLaren. I can't remember the other guy's name who's pretty quick in IndyCar, but and Pato Award, that's it, yeah, and give them a shot at F1, see what they're made of, because I'm sure that they'd bring some fire to the championship, and I think it'd be good all round. But it seems like the teams that are in it are happy with the way it is at the moment, and they don't really want to water down the prize money across 11 teams as opposed to 10, because that's what it boils down to, doesn't it?
Well, exactly.
Someone's going to come out and
everyone's getting 10% of this figure, whereas if you get an American team in it, the interest in America goes up, the investment goes up, and you get to split a lot more money 11 ways, and everyone does better. But that's far too logical, isn't it? Okay, let's just bring it back very quickly back to the BTCC. Nick Houston has brought in the crazy carts. Absolutely brilliant. It's been a smash hit with everyone. Have you had a go on it, and what do you think of the crazy carts?
Oh, sorry, we're back.
Probably frozen.
Yeah, crazy carts. I haven't. I'm still waiting for my invite to come across and do a round of the crazy carts. But
come on, Nick.
But yeah, it looks pretty kinetic and crazy from where I'm standing.
Yeah, I had a go on the Autosport show. There was some there. I was down with the guy who used to work for Power Max Racing, a guy called Simon McNally, OMG Racing, and the BSB and the Chasing the Racing podcast guys. And I had a go on it. It's ridiculous. It is great fun. Not the safest, but it is good fun. No, good stuff. Okay,
Yeah,
let's have a very quick look here. Sorry? Oh, there we are.
So I think I was having a few issues there with the connection, but yeah, back now.
Oh, that's okay. Well, we are going to wind down quickly. Elliot Faggoter on Twitter, he did say, do you do sim racing, and how big of a positive impact do you feel sim racing is to a driver? Good question.
Yeah, so I got into sim racing during COVID, like a lot of drivers did. I wasn't really aware of sim racing prior to COVID, but I've got fully invested in it during COVID when we couldn't do real life racing. And to be honest, it taught me a hell of a lot, and it made me a more precise driver and technically a better driver as well, as I came into racing the Ginetta and cars like that, which required a bit more precision in your driving inputs. For one, it taught me how to left foot brake, because in a BMW compact cup car, you drive it like a normal road car and have to heel and toe it and use the clutch. Whereas a Ginetta GT5 and a touring car, you can left foot brake and you don't need to use the clutch. So by the time I stepped into the Ginetta for the first time, I'd already done tons of sim racing, braking with my left foot, and kind of trained my left foot to modulate the brake pedal in the way that it should be. So for me, it was really useful, and just kind of keeping your eye in across the winter months with racing and staying sharp is, I love it. I just wish I had more time to do it, really.
Yeah. And it's great to see the rise of it, and obviously there's people now that guys like you who have used it to their advantage in terms of getting into into the BTCC and with Ginetta and stuff. And there's more racers making that transition. I think there's one in British F4, Nina Gatterman. She's gone in from sim racing into real racing, and it's fantastic. It's good to see. Long may that continue. Just a few fun questions. Katie Eames asked a couple earlier on. For whatever reason, if you couldn't be on the BTCC grid, where would you like to be? That kind of ties in with one of my questions, so that's great. Is there anything that you'd give a go to if you weren't on the BTCC grid, or anything you'd like?
Well, I've got two answers to that question. So, yeah. Firstly, I mean, the realistic answer is that I wouldn't go through the stress of trying to raise the budget and get myself out on something equal to the touring car grid that isn't British touring cars, i.e. I wouldn't try and do the same for British GT. I wouldn't go and do European GT because it's not touring cars. I've grown up watching touring cars, and that's what my passion is, unless a GT driver's, unless a team's gonna, want me to come and drive either for free or as a really good deal, which doesn't really happen so much these days. Yeah, it's just, for me, it's not worth the stress. I want to go and race touring cars, and that's all I care about. So if I wasn't racing touring cars, it would be something much more sort of club related, really. In the UK, it'd probably be something on the BRSCC, or it'd be maybe pickup truck racing, or just something that's fun. It's a bit different. But if budget wasn't an issue and I could race whatever I want, I'd go and race NASCAR.
Yes.
NASCAR is my biggest passion away from touring cars, and I've watched pretty much every NASCAR race since I was about 10 years old, and occupied the telly on a Sunday night for the last 15 years. When my mum and dad want to watch something normal on the telly, I'll be sitting there watching NASCAR. So absolutely love it to bits, and I would go and race NASCAR in a heartbeat.
Yeah, it is absolutely fantastic. I love it. And there's a great finish the other week. Was it closest in the history of NASCAR? It was an incredible finish. Forget where that was now.
It was at Kansas.
Kansas, that was it. That was it. I was thinking Darlington, but that was the weekend just gone, wasn't it? Yeah, absolutely superb. And you get things like Ross Chastain's wall ride, which you can't do anymore, but that was absolutely fabulous as well. Yeah, great series. Yeah, love that. That's terrific. And Katie also asked, what is the best biscuit and what's the best ice cream flavour?
Okay. There's quite a few of them, actually. Obviously, I'm an athlete and all that, but I do like a chocolate digestive. There's these biscuits I've got over there at the moment that I might have to go and get in a minute, but they're like these. They're called Bastagnas. They're like a slight gingerbread type flavour, but you'd normally see them in France quite a lot, but they've started selling in the UK, and they go really, really well when you dip them in your cup of tea, because they absorb the tea, but they don't break into 1,000 pieces. So
proper.
Really nice. Yeah. Ice cream. I don't really have ice cream all that often. I'm more of a fruity flavored person when it comes to ice cream. You know, I like a nice raspberry ice cream that's got the bits in it, you know, or the strawberry, or I stick a dollop of chocolate. It's normally about 2 or 3 balls, to be honest, when I have an ice cream. I don't just have one, you know. So yeah.
No, you've got to do it properly. Proper job. Good stuff. See, proper chats here. We're talking about biscuits and things. Elliot said they're like an OT looking Hovis biscuit thing. Elliot is aware of the biscuits. Elliot is up. He's got.
I don't know about OT, but it sounds like he knows what I'm talking about. But yeah, they're like rectangular shaped with these little ridges in the middle of them.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're called Bastang or something like that. But yeah, they're good. They're good.
I'm going to check those out. I'm stuck with Maryland cookies at the moment in my kitchen. Okay, let's have a quick wind down. Just a few little fun questions that we always ask. Have you got a favourite car that you've raced and a favourite circuit to race at?
That's quite an easy answer for me because I've only ever raced 3 different cars. There you go, Baston. Yeah. I mean, the BMW, I really loved driving that car. I really loved driving that car around Snetterton because you got to use all the gears. I'll give a track for each car. So BMW, I really loved at Snet on the 300 layout. The Ginetta GT5 was really, really awesome around Thruxton. It was fingertip stuff. You know, you on the edge, absolutely everywhere. Car could spin at a blink of an eye. And the touring car is absolutely fantastic round Brands Grand Prix. There's just something about that finale meeting at Brands Hatch. And I know we're winding down, but I'll just leave you with this little memory from me from last year. And I've told it to a couple of people, but after the pole position at Silverstone, obviously quite an important session is to then what you can actually follow up in the following qualifying session to make sure that it wasn't a fluke. And I went into Brands Hatch knowing that I probably had to win all 3 Jack Sears races to beat my teammate Andrew. And I was full of confidence at the time in my driving. And I went out and put it P9 on the Grand Prix circuit, which I was really, really pleased with because, the Grand Prix circuit at Brands Hatch is a far more technical circuit than perhaps Silverstone National, where you can fluke a lap time. But, I followed it up with a 9th, which I thought was really good. And I was sitting on the start finish line just before race 1. And it was a glorious day, really, really nice sunny weather, blue skies. And I'm sitting there just before the green flag goes for the warm-up lap. And I'm like, look where I am. I'm looking up at the grandstand. And this time last year, I was sat in as a paying punter in the Paddock Hill grandstand watching this very meeting that I absolutely adored. And now I'm sitting 9th on the grid. I've got Jake Hill to my left. I've got Colin Turkington just in front of me. I've got Ash Sutton, Dan Camish, Rory Butcher, Bobby Thompson, all the big names, and I've got 2 BMWs behind me, and I'm like, I'm not just out here. I'm sitting 9th on the grid at arguably the crown jewel event of the BTCC calendar. And that was a real pinch me. That was probably the best experience of my whole season, was just sitting there for race 1 of the Sunday of BTCC finale day in 9th with those names sitting in front of me. I was like, yeah, that's proper. That is.
I absolutely love that. It's like that real kind of, it's like the fan in
Yeah,
the UK.
I was literally a
Like,
fan that had qualified 9th. And I'm like, 12 months ago, I was sitting in seat, R38 or whatever it was, up in Paddock Hill Grandstand watching this meeting as an enthusiastic fan. And now I'm about to start in the top 10 to try and win a championship in touring cars. I was like, this is just surreal. So yeah, the GP circuit at Brands Hatch, absolutely phenomenal. Best track in the country, especially for a touring car.
I'm so glad you said that, because it's the first one I ever went to when I was 6 for a bike meeting, which is 1987. So that was good. And everyone, apart from Connor Daly 2 weeks ago, that everyone who's come on has said that they absolutely love Brands GP, whether it be Mario Andretti or Willie Ribbs or Danny Sullivan or any of the touring car guys or the bike riders. Everyone loves Brands GP. Although Connor Daly did say he only did it once and it was in the wet, so he didn't like it. But it is a fantastic circuit, and I'm so glad that you've got that lovely memory for it as well. It just takes it up a level. Okay. Final question. Ask it to everyone. Obviously, you've shared the track with a few people in different series. Is there any driver that sticks out in your mind as being maybe not the best, but just a guy that you think he or she is just really, really, really good? Is there anyone that sticks out in your mind as being the level that you'd like to get to or surpass or something like that?
That's a really difficult question to answer, to be honest, because touring cars is by far and away the biggest championship I've ever raced in. So it's not like, Andrew, my teammate of last year, could probably answer this question better because he's raced in the Le Mans 24 hours. He's raced at Daytona in the Rolex and all stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, obviously the drivers I'm up against on the touring car grid are some of the best tin top racers in the whole world, without a shadow of a doubt. Ash Sutton, Tom Ingram, absolute legends, and Colin Turkington. They're just world class drivers. In the other championships, I think I've raced against some people that will go on to be big names. Like you look at the GT5 grid of a couple of years ago, and you've got people like Will Orton, Will Jenkins, Harley Horton. Year before, John Bennett, who's obviously a budding driver in Formula 3. Josh Steed, my teammate of 2021, he was blisteringly fast. It's a shame that, he is still a fantastic driver, struggles a little bit getting the budget together to get to where he should be. But, he would, I think, as an aspiring GT driver, he would go all the way if he had if he could get a lucky break, let's say. Stephen Daly in the BMW Compact Cup, he would be a fantastic if he had an opportunity at touring cars or British GT. He'd be as good as anyone, I think. So yeah, I've raced against a few good people that I've learned a lot from, and I think will go on to become big drivers. But like I say, I've taken such a leap into British touring car that I can't really say I've raced against a Formula One driver or something like that, where I'm like, wow, because
Sure, and certainly with the BTCC, some of the names you mentioned, it's a very tricky question to answer. That's why we always leave it to the last, leave it to the end. Well, it's been 2 hours and 20 minutes, and it feels like it's flown by for me. It always does. We always run over on these things, but it's because we love talking about motorsport. But it's a great place to wrap up. Well, firstly, thank you very much for coming on, having a chat, especially again at short notice and changing things around after the little merry-go-round we've had this week. It's been great speaking with you, hearing your slightly different journey to most people, and hopefully this is the second of many seasons in the BTCC for you. So thank you very much for coming on. It's been great speaking with you.
No, it's been my pleasure. Really thoroughly enjoyed it. Like I say, I've watched plenty of these podcasts before and been patiently waiting for my invite to come on and talk motorsport for a couple of hours. But yeah, really pleased to have joined such a illustrious list of motorsport guests you've had over the years. So thank you very much.
No, you're very welcome. I was meaning to ask you a few times before, but then other things kept coming up. So yeah, with the day-to-day life. But I'm glad we finally had you on for a chat. And thank you everyone for all the comments and the interactions, and for clearing up the biscuit situation as well. Really appreciate your support, and we will be back next week. But once again, everyone, thank you very much for tuning in. Mikey, once again, thank you to you, and wish you all the very best for the rest of the season as well. Hopefully there'll be more polls and some podiums to come your way.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it. See what we can do.
Fantastic. Great stuff. Thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you again very soon. Good night.